Chapter 261, Aboard the Thief Ship, Part 2. Ever since that fateful day, Ethan and his elves have become the most fearsome presence on the uncharted island. The instant any wild elf catches sight of them, it bolts without thinking. The only group still bold enough to remain in place is the hunting swallowtail butterfly clan, precisely because they understood what Ethan intended from the start. When Ethan issued the call, they gathered at once, and no further confrontation was required. Still, Ethan technically resides within the Swallowtail clan's territory, making him something of a half-tenant on their home ground. Out of respect for their elders, he's deliberately left them ample resources, just as one might leave an offering by a shrine. The Swallowtails themselves are gentle by nature and rarely pick fights with other elf tribes. In fact, nearly every clash they've had with the Poison Butterfly faction was provoked by those venomous rivals, not by the Swallowtails. This peaceable disposition has made it all the easier for Ethan to hunt the poison butterflies while leaving the Swallowtails in peace. Even if other adventurers or invaders set foot on the island, they typically steer clear of harming the Swallowtails. After all, these butterflies, swift, alert, and ever watchful, serve as a natural line of defense for the island, and nobody in their right mind wants to undermine its first warning system. Ethan halted his purge after clearing only half of the Papillon hunting guild. If he'd tried to eliminate them entirely, the sea elves would have swooped in to raid the now defenseless island, and that would have been a disaster. So once he defeated the guild's leader and taken her prisoner, she swore never to resume her raids, he left the remaining hunters in peace. By that point, the island's stronger elves, having trained under Ethan's guidance, had risen to an impressive new power level. Ethan himself had collected a substantial hoard of small and medium-grade elemental energy crystals. It was the end of the 5th day. He'd spent the last day and a half dismantling the swallowtail hunters. Yet he didn't depart until the 8th day. What occupied him during those extra 2.5 days? The answer lay with the tropical dragon that had been shadowing him relentlessly. Now that the elves were confident in their newfound strength, they begged Ethan to lead them in a rematch against the very dragon that had nearly killed them on their first encounter. Ethan's heart sank when he learned that the tropical dragon had already reached level 40, well beyond anything he'd faced, and yet he couldn't deny the spark of hope burning inside him. He wanted to prove he could take it on. For the next 2 days, Ethan led his 5 elves through one challenging battle after another against the colossal grass flying type. On paper, they even had some attribute advantages. The tropical dragon was doubly weak to fire, rock, poison, and flying moves, and 4 times as vulnerable to ice attacks. Despite that, the sheer gap in levels was daunting. Even all 5 elves working in concert struggled to dent the dragon's massive hide. The very first encounter ended in utter defeat. Ethan's elves were outmatched from the start. Only thanks to the sudden intervention of his burly, simple-minded companion, whose quick teleport grabbed the elves from the dragon's jaws, did they avoid grievous harm. Had that move come a moment later, Ethan feared his team might have been seriously injured. Curiously, the tropical dragon never followed up for a killing blow. Rumor had it that on this remote island, no wild elf had dared challenge its reign. Over time, it had grown unusually gentle. If Ethan hadn't struck first, the dragon would likely have contented itself with simply tossing intruders aside, then lumbering back to its solitude. Even in defeat, that mercy gave Ethan a sliver of hope and the resolve to try again. Chapter 7. The Unyielding Assault. Ethan surveyed the clearing with a steady gaze. Around him, a squad of feral beasts flexed their claws and stamped impatiently on the leaf-strewn ground. Their bodies were marred by fresh scars, deep gashes already knitting closed thanks to their astonishing regenerative power. But no wound was an excuse to relent, not with the tropical dragon waiting just beyond the tree line. "Ready yourselves," Ethan called. He unsheathed a handful of high-level energy cubes, each one humming with raw power. A huge jug of milk, harvested from the local giant's dairy herds, rested at his side. Every drop was essential fuel for the beast's muscles and magic. Above all, Ethan's careful ministrations, his healing hands pressing poultices into wounds, kept them fighting fit. At his signal, the beast surged forward in a snarling wave. The tropical dragon emerged from the mist like a living mountain, emerald scales shimmering with dew. It bellowed, a sound that cracked branches and shook the earth. Saliva dripped from its maw, sizzling where it touched the damp leaves. Strike after strike, the beasts unleashed their fury. Energy cubes detonated in violet pulses, magical crests of force hammering at the dragon's flanks. But the creature's reflexes were astonishing. It coiled its powerful neck, snapping its jaws shut on charging limbs. With a swipe of its tail, it sent half a dozen beasts sprawling into the nearby undergrowth. By the time the first sun dipped below the canopy, the assault had faltered. Ethan ordered a withdrawal. Calmly, he tended each wounded beast, drawing out splinters and weaving restorative magic through torn muscle. Within moments, thanks to their rapid healing, they were ready to fight again. Thus began 2 days and nights of relentless combat. The clearing became a maelstrom of claws, fangs, and draconic roars. Only brief respites to eat from the milk jug or gulp down water from a nearby enchanted pond interrupted the non-stop onslaught. The beasts, fueled by energy cubes and Ethan's unwavering direction, refused to yield. The dragon, for all its might, grew visibly warier. Each fresh strike left new dents in its once impenetrable hide. Unlike the beast's voracious appetite for energy cubes and milk, the dragon could draw only on the faintly charged waters of a hidden spring at the pond's center. That water hastened its recovery, but it paled beside the beast's regenerative prowess. Still, the dragon endured, angrier, sharper, more cunning with each clash. By the fourth sunrise, the elves who had allied with Ethan moved to the front. Lithe and precise, they danced around the dragon's thunderous blows, their blades cutting arcs of silver light. Hours of prior observation had taught them the dragon's favored patterns, the tipping of its head before a fire breath, the subtle rise of its tail before a sweeping strike. Each elf skillfully turned these tells to their advantage. One moment they thrust, testing a newly learned spinning thrust. The next, they executed a perfected lunge from their earliest training. With every encounter, they refined their timing and footwork, treating the dragon as both opponent and tutor. Ethan orchestrated the entire ballet, directing the beasts to pin the dragon's wings while the elves probed its flanks. When a beast stumbled, he stepped in to bind its wounds. When an elf signaled a fresh opening, he unleashed a crystal burst of healing energy to fortify their resolve. The tropical dragon's patience finally snapped under this ceaseless pressure. It reared up on twisted hind legs and unleashed a guttural roar that echoed like thunder through the jungle. Salty drool cascaded from its fangs as it lunged into the horde, talons raking through fur and leather. But Ethan's forces held firm. Though exhaustion weighed heavy in their bones, they would not break. 2 days, 2 nights, and now a 5th day of battle had forged them into a single determined strike force. And the dragon, once an unassailable legend, stood battered, its defiance flickering against the onslaught. A decisive moment was approaching. Ethan tightened his grip on the remaining energy cubes and scanned his comrades' faces. Air eyes shone fierce determination. They would push through this final barrier and claim victory, no matter how long it took. Ethan stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the 3 tropical dragons slump against the scorched earth. Their colossal wings fluttered weakly, each beat a reminder of how fiercely they'd battled. Even a seasoned level 40 Yalong elf had been driven to exhaustion trying to subdue them, and this was just a single encounter. Now the dragons hungered for rest, but none of the surrounding elves dared approach. Ethan stepped forward into the tense hush. His intention was plain. He wanted one of these magnificent beasts as his personal flying mount. At first, he'd planned to bind it as a war companion, an uncompromising bond of command and obedience. But the largest dragon, known among the elves as Longning, refused to be forced. Gentle by nature, Longning showed little taste for combat. The more the elves pressed, the more the dragon resisted. Realizing brute strength wouldn't win this day, Ethan gathered his closest elf companions. They used a simple empathic induction device, what some called an ECG conduit, designed to bridge thoughts between humanoid and dumb beast. After hours of patient effort, they tapped into Longning's mind and glimpsed his true feelings. A yearning for peace, for open skies unspoiled by war. Ethan and the elves took turns painting vivid word pictures of the wider world. soaring over gleaming cities, streaking past towering skyscrapers, skimming above highways crowded with rumbling cars and silver airplanes. They spoke of mist-shrouded forests teeming with unseen creatures, of mountain peaks dusted with eternal snow, and of islands fringed by crystalline waters. Each image kindled something in Longning's ancient heart. The dragon's amber eyes softened as he visualized life beyond this battlefield, companionship rather than conquest, exploration rather than domination. When at last Ethan extended his hand in friendship instead of command, Longning hesitated only a moment, then bowed his great head in consent. A cheer rippled through the elf ranks. Together, Ethan and Longning prepared to depart, wings unfurling in the golden afternoon light. At last, the tropical dragon would leave his comfortable grove, his ancestral home, to fly across uncharted skies at Ethan's side. And so began a partnership forged not by force, but by understanding and wonder. Ethan stared across the mist-shrouded lake at the tropical dragon lounging on the far shore. He'd hoped to persuade the creature to accompany him off this uncharted island, but despite its mild curiosity, it still refused. He realized that trying to force such a powerful, temperamental being into obedience would backfire, and even if he did somehow subdue it, he wouldn't dare risk flying on its back without any guarantee of safety. Defeated, Ethan set about preparing what would be his final meal on the island. Gathering driftwood and scraps of fresh fish and fruit, he built a small fire by the water's edge. As dusk settled, its flickering light danced in his tired eyes. He arranged skewers of marinated meat and grilled pineapple, laying out everything on a broad, flat rock. The tropical dragon watched in silence, tall, emerald-green scales glinting in the firelight, its wings folded neatly at its sides. Though it had never warmed to the idea of journeying with him, it had come to accept Ethan as the island's temporary guardian. Still, the dragon seemed bewildered by the rich, smoky scent rising from the grill. Ethan skewered the last piece of meat and stepped back. "Come on," he said softly. "Just try it." He tossed a charred morsel onto the sand. The dragon's golden eyes widened, and it crept forward, sniffing tentatively. Ever since it had hatched, the dragon had been strictly herbivorous, its teeth ill-suited for tearing flesh or chewing raw meat. But this was different. The heat had tenderized the meat. The smoky glaze made it almost melt in the mouth. The dragon broke off a bite, chewed slowly, and swallowed. A surprise, rumble rolled through its throat. Then it tipped its head toward Ethan and let out a long, happy chirp. Encouraged, it scooped up more pieces in its talons, savoring each mouthful. Ethan smiled, relief and delight mingling in his chest. For a moment at least, this fierce guardian of the island had become something more. A friend brought together by the simple power of a good barbecue. Ethan watched the tropical dragon's eyes grow wide with delight after that first bite. He'd never seen a creature so utterly captivated by food. Beside him, the elves exchanged knowing smiles. They'd all drawn the same conclusion. This dragon would go to any lengths for another taste. "We'll show you a world of flavors," Ethan called softly. "All you have to do is carry me and my companions across the skies. In return, we'll guide you to every delicacy the fairy realm and beyond have to offer." At the mention of more roast and sweet fruits, the dragon's tail flicked in excitement, its great maw quivering with anticipation. The majestic beast, who had resisted every demand until now, let out a low, rumbling chuckle. "All right," it rumbled. "I'll serve as your mount. But promise me one thing, no battles. I've no taste for fighting." Ethan raised a hand in agreement. "I promise, we'll avoid combat whenever possible." With the pact sealed, the elves led the dragon down to the docks, where the notorious sky thief, a sleek, wind-slicing airship, was moored. Its black sails billowed ominously, but Ethan's confidence never wavered. Together with their new ally, they climbed aboard. Ethan paused on the gangplank, glancing back at the harbor lights fading behind them. The dragon's gentle, knowing gaze met his, as if to say, "Let's go taste the world." Above them, the sky thief's engines awakened with a low hum. Soon, they would have to outrun every pursuer who wanted the ship, and its strange new passenger, for themselves. But for now, Ethan allowed himself one satisfied smile as the airship lifted into the star-flecked night. Their journey was only just beginning. Chapter 262, Growth of the Elves. The tropical dragon stretched its great wings and lifted Ethan into the sky. Ahead lay the Fengyuan archipelago, just as the map had shown. They couldn't make the entire journey in one go. Several stopovers on nearby islands were inevitable, but once aloft, Ethan couldn't suppress a broad grin. Even though his clothes were in tatters and his body ached, he felt an exhilarating sense of accomplishment. He'd only intended to find a temporary hideout when he first set foot on that nameless isle, but what he discovered there exceeded every hope. Hidden among the endless chain of islands was a secret this grand. Ethan toyed with the idea of hopping from island to island again, chasing another lucky break like this one. He knew, of course, that such fortune rarely repeated itself. His thoughts turned to the final trial, still 20 days away. With his current power, he was convinced that, even if he couldn't claim first place, he could at least ensure his own survival. After all, just before leaving the nameless isle, he'd faced down and defeated a level 40 tropical dragon. His qualification badge might remain light green, but the dragon had been no pushover, and neither was he. Ethan doubted that the tropical dragon would ever sit out a real emergency. Despite the promise that he wouldn't be sent into routine skirmishes, the dragon would surely rise to the occasion if crisis struck. Still, such hopes were beyond his control. What he could manage was the steady advancement of his companions, the dumb beast and the dark crow. In the past 8 days, Dark Crow has shot up from level 26 to level 30. That's no small feat. On this island, the 4 principal races are either insect-based elves or grass-based elves, but Dark Crow, being one of the winged elves, enjoys a hefty bonus to his core attributes, which explains his accelerated growth. He hasn't learned any new fundamental skills yet, but raw combat effectiveness isn't measured by skill trees alone. Ethan has also tweaked Dark Crow's harness, boosting its load capacity to 50 pounds. Any further upgrade will require an entirely new rig. And once Dark Crow earns full elf status, Ethan could finally shed his rocket captain title and wield authority on par with an actual squadron leader, albeit a junior one. Even so, that promotion would mark a significant step toward the power he needs. Ethan's current rank is that of a squadron captain, yet unlike most officers at his level, who would normally command 5 sub-captains, he has no one under his command. He'll have to prove himself all the way through this ultimate trial before he can hope to recruit any lieutenants. Of all the battle elves under Ethan's banner, the mightiest remains his dumb beast. Now at level 32, it has unlocked 2 foundational skills: Water Surge, a water-type attack far stronger than a simple water gun, and Mind Hammer, a super-powered, close-quarters strike. Although Mind Hammer matches the raw force of Mental Impact, its effect and delivery are completely different. If Ethan had better opportunities to leverage Dumbbeast's water affinity or its superpower in coordinated assaults, the creature's level could easily be far higher. Ghoststone's progress, by comparison, has been more modest. He climbed from level 26 to 29, but no further. Tasked with guarding Ethan day and night and seldom venturing out to take the offensive, except when dealing with lesser threats, Ghoststone's growth has been constrained by his protective duties. Even so, a 3-level gain is nothing to sneeze at. As Ethan prepares for the next phase of the ultimate trial, he can only hope that by the end of it, he'll have earned the right to lead a full squadron, complete with those 5 subordinate captains he so badly needs. 3 things made Ethan's performance so decisive in that battle. First, the restrictions imposed by his toxic system attributes actually amplified his role, focusing all his power where it mattered most. Second, by finally absorbing every last trace of poisonous gas, Ghoststone's T-Cyan qualification fully crystallized, he became the 3rd elf ever to attain that rank. The raw energy stored in the poison was crucial to his promotion to the 3rd level. Finally, there was the Big Milk Tank. As a support wizard, she rarely entered direct combat, so her level crept only from 23 to 25, but for a healer and assistant, that was more than sufficient. On that unnamed island, it was the Big Milk Tank who quietly cared for the elves and kept Ethan on his feet. Paula, on the other hand, surged to level 30. The siege skill she mastered at level 28 proved to be the other linchpin in our victory over the tropical dragon, alongside Ghoststone's poison, of course. With her siege command, Every elf under our banner struck in unison. The more of us there were, the more devastating our combined assault became. Ethan watched with admiration as Paula's newest ice spell shattered the scales of a defeated tropical dragon. Her value to his team had never been clearer. Leveling up hadn't just increased her raw power, it had amplified her skill potency too. She now struck grass-type foes for double damage and delivered a remarkable quadruple effect against tropical dragons. No wonder her ice proficiency was soaring. Paula's innate talent for ice magic had finally culminated in her mastering every spell available in her repertoire. Pleased with her progress, Ethan was already researching new techniques that might broaden her frosty arsenal even further. Yet among all of Ethan's elves, none had grown as dramatically as Scorpoon, the scorpion-tailed scorpion. He'd started at a much lower level than the others, which left him plenty of room to surge ahead. As an insect poison type, Scorpoon was a natural counter to grass element enemies, and he proved it time after time, cleaving through toadstool mushrooms and outmaneuvering the cunning Tengu with ferocious efficiency. Ethan never let his scorpion-tailed companion charge into battle against wild elves that vastly outleveled it, and the scorpion wasn't about to make that mistake either. It instinctively picked opponents no more than 3 or 4 levels above its own. Thanks to its superior qualification rating, it could hold its ground. What's more, the elves themselves channeled their weaker members to face the scorpion, reserving their champions for other foes. Under this careful matchmaking, the scorpion rocketed from level 17 to level 22 in a single leap, a rare 5-level surge. Such rapid growth came at a cost, though. Its move mastery dipped noticeably, and without diligent practice, it risked becoming unreliable in a pinch. By the end of it, every one of Ethan's primary battle elves had enjoyed a dramatic level boost. With this lineup, Ethan was no longer the weakest among the Rocket Squadron captains. Few captains commanded so many high-caliber elves. Some could only field creatures of yellow or even dark yellow rank. As levels climbed, the gaps in qualification among the captains became impossible to ignore. No holds barred. The moment the arena gates clanged shut, Ethan knew he'd be facing them in an unrestricted, all-out brawl. According to every analyst, he could cut them down single-handedly, but he couldn't afford to underestimate them. The Quasi-King's hard-won battle experience and the arsenal of combat chips they carried weren't mere decorations. They made these opponents dangerous. Dust swirled at Ethan's feet, and the crowd's roar climbed to a fever pitch. There was no room for hesitation. Victory or death, this was war. Stay tuned for Chapter 3. Subscribe now for full access. Monthly passes and recommended tickets are available. Chapter 263. Dragon Trainer? Ethan surveyed his haul from the unnamed island. 16 medium energy crystals, the size of his fists, 1 half-fist-sized medium crystal, and 345 small crystals in a rainbow of attributes. 95 insect system crystals and 66 toxin system crystals were among them, priceless resources for the elves, who were currently the weakest members of his team. He stretched out on the back of his tropical dragon, letting the sea breeze ruffle his hair as the others relaxed around him. The afternoon sun glittered off the waves, and for a moment, everything felt perfectly serene. Then a spark of mischief flared in Ethan's eyes. He slid off the dragon's neck, reached into his satchel, and withdrew the elven sphere that contained his Tyrannosaurus. Without warning, he hurled it into the surf. Water exploded skyward as a colossal T-Rex elf burst forth on the ocean's surface, roaring so thunderously that the dragon shuddered beneath Ethan. "Feeling feisty, are we?" Ethan called out, a teasing grin on his face. The Tyrannosaurus let out another earth-shaking bellow and pounded the water with its massive claws, churning the sea into froth. But its roar trailed off as it took in the endless expanse of blue. No land, no prey, not even the human who had summoned it. Confusion gleamed in its giant eyes. Ethan leaned forward. "Looks like you're a little out of your element, buddy. Land predator on the high seas. Brilliant plan." The beast let out a frustrated growl and thrashed its tail, sending whitecaps in all directions. It wasn't stupid. It knew something was very wrong. But now that it was released, escape depended entirely on itself. Ethan laughed softly. "All right, T-Rex, show me what you can do. Prove you've got what it takes to be a dragon trainer's partner. no matter where I send you." Above them, the dragon snorted in amusement, wings twitching as if eager to see the spectacle unfold. And on the endless ocean stage, the giant Tyrannosaurus braced itself for its first true test. The Tyrannosaurus dragon crept forward, caution guiding each step. It knew that as long as the human remained still, it held the advantage, but that changed in an instant when a vast shadow swept across the clearing. The dragon lifted its head to find the sky swallowed by a single, dark silhouette. Slowly, the shape resolved into a second dragon, its scales as black as midnight, gliding effortlessly above the water. Perched on the newcomer's broad back stood a young man, Ethan, his posture calm and assured. At his word, the tropical dragon lowered itself until its belly skimmed the lake's surface, wings stilling as ripples fanned outward. The Tyrannosaurus dragon felt the sun's warmth drain away. The world seemed plunged into ice. But it wasn't cold, it sensed so much as raw, unyielding pressure. That pressure emanated from the tropical dragon and the mysterious elven rider who shared its bloodline. The dragon's aura was steeped in ancient power, its dragon blood magic more concentrated than anything the Tyrannosaurus dragon had ever encountered. Layered atop that raw might was an unmistakable suppression, a force so potent it threatened to crush his spirit on the spot. In that single moment, the Tyrannosaurus dragon realized something astonishing. In the mere days since their last encounter, this seemingly ordinary human had tamed one of the realm's most formidable dragon-blooded elves. And now, standing before him, Ethan and his terrifying new ally held undeniable mastery over the skies. Ethan's heart skipped a beat when he saw the tropical dragon's massive head lower a fraction, one glowing eye fixing itself on the Tyrannosaurus. In an instant, the T-Rex's armored scales bristled. This was no ordinary threat. Where Ethan's own intimidation had been cold and clinical, the tropical dragon radiated a raw, crushing power. A moment later, Ethan's slow-witted familiar piped into the dragon's mind with a single simple command: play along. The exotic worm, a 40-level elder with noble draconic blood, bristled the suggestion. He might deign to bear Ethan as a rider, but to perform on cue? Preposterous. Even the prompt, "do it well and you'll get a feast tonight," felt beneath his dignity. And yet, the promise of a lavish dinner proved irresistible. With surprising alacrity, the tropical dragon's pride melted away. He bowed his great head in acquiescence, each scale settling back into place as though nothing were amiss. At that moment, the Tyrannosaurus let out a low, trembling growl. It had already been beaten, by Ethan's strategy and by the dragon's combined might, but witnessing the elder worm so effortlessly bend to Ethan's will chilled the T-Rex more deeply than any blow. Defeated or not, here stood a creature so powerful that even its reluctant obedience carried the weight of doom. And that realization, more than any physical strike, was what truly terrified the Tyrannosaurus. Ethan had another compelling reason to eat: sheer hunger. The moment the dragon announced dinner, even the fearsome Tyrannosaurus quailed. Its predatory glare at Ethan was unmistakable. "No meal tonight? Then I'll turn you into my next snack." Yet, at the thought of food, the usually mild-mannered tropical dragon adopted an almost feral intensity. That murderous look alone was enough to cow the T-Rex into reluctant submission. But it wasn't just the dragon's newfound savagery that shocked the massive beast. Tapping into its latent psychic power, the normally placid tropical dragon lifted Ethan clean off the ground. Together, they hovered directly above the Tyrannosaurus's snout. The giant reptile's eyes widened in disbelief as it sensed Ethan's aura rippling through the air. What it perceived shook it to the core. Ethan's strength had suddenly vaulted 2 tiers above its own. How could this human, despite relying on the elves' draft assistance to level up, outrank such a colossal creature? The elves themselves had only a hazy understanding of power tiers, but even they could feel the unmistakable jolt of authority that now emanated from Ethan. Beasts like us judge one another by the faint tug of power in the air. Whoever feels stronger really is. It's a crude sense, no precise numbers, no clear scale, but it rarely lies. Right now, Tyrannosaurus can't deny it. This dumb beast he's up against is on a whole different tier. He isn't an equal. Not even close. He's lucky he didn't try to run. If he had, he might well have lost his tail forever, its delicate structure crushed by human boots. Instead, an eerie mercy descends from the lone elf human pressing his heel into Tyrannosaurus's head. There's no room for escape anymore. All that matters is survival. And survival means submission. Tyrannosaurus's thoughts shift. How can I curry favor with this terrifying creature? Perhaps, by earning its goodwill, his own strength might grow. In a world where power reigns, forging an alliance, even an unsteady, awkward one, with the strongest is often the only way to rise. Ethan watched in astonishment as the Tyrannosaurus lowered its massive head. When they first met, the great beast had fought him half-heartedly, surely thinking the young trainer too weak to prevail without the aid of two elven companions. But now, something fundamental had shifted. The T-Rex's eyes glinted with respect, not disdain. He felt it as a quiet hum through their bond, a recognition of his growing strength. Ethan had thought it a long shot. Could he really master a creature of such raw power? Yet here it was, yielding to him. Gripping the coarse scales atop the Tyrannosaurus's skull, he allowed himself a brief, disbelieving grin. "Did we really do it?" he whispered into the vast, open air. Beside him, the tropical dragon circled lazily, its emerald wings beating a gentle rhythm against the dawn sky. Together, the three of them moved in perfect harmony. Ethan balanced between two champions of a world he was only beginning to understand. As they soared above the treetops, Ethan's thoughts turned inward. Could he truly become a dragon trainer, an official master of beasts? He already commanded the fire-obsessed land predator and this swift, vibrant drake. Add the plucky little dodo dragon and the silver-winged champion he'd met in the northern passes, and he'd have a quartet unmatched in any arena. All that remained was honing their teamwork, learning their strengths, and trusting in the bond they were forging. The wind rushed past him, carrying the scent of pine and promise. Yes, he decided, closing his eyes against the thrill of it all, this was only the beginning. Chapter 264, Reaching Fengwan. 3 days later, 10 kilometers off the shore of Kana City's Fengwan district, a tropical dragon flapped its emerald wings in rapid, powerful strokes. Under clear skies and the blazing sun, chlorophyll-breathing dragons like this one could boost their flight speed by at least 20%. Fueled by the rising heat, it sliced through the humid air with astonishing swiftness. Beneath it soared a second rider, a massive Tyrannosaurus dragon, its stout form a stark contrast to the lithe tropical dragon above. Ethan had alternated between these two dragon mounts, stopping on several tiny islets along the way to rest and replenish their supplies. Now, after 3 grueling days, they were finally closing in on their destination, Fengwan. Back on the beach, people paused whatever they were doing, playing volleyball, building sandcastles, strolling along the water's edge, as a strange silhouette appeared on the horizon. Through a child's toy telescope, the outline of a giant dragon against the sky drew gasps of amazement. "Look, what is that?" "Some kind of elf, riding above the sea," a young girl cried, clutching her father's hand and pointing upward. "It's huge," her friend replied. "And it's coming straight at us, so fast!" A few beachgoers, with even a passing knowledge of dragon lore, recognized the creature immediately. "That's a tropical dragon," said a college student who had studied draconic biology. "I've never seen one fly so low over the ocean." "Is someone riding it?" another onlooker asked, squinting into the distance. "Yeah," the student confirmed. "And look, there's a second dragon behind it. It must be carrying someone important." Heads turned, phones were raised, and whispers of excitement rippled through the crowd. No one could deny it. These weren't ordinary seabirds or a trick of the light. 2 massive dragons were bearing down on the beach, and their rider, whatever he or she might be, was coming in for a landing at Fengwan. Only a truly powerful trainer could have subdued a tropical dragon of that size, someone whispered nervously. Another bystander, trembling, pulled out his phone. "We should call the police first. I don't know if that person is safe." Within minutes, a police motorcycle rolled onto the beach, its siren crackling as it eased to a stop. Riding alongside the officer was Miss Juncha's Thunderbolt, her imposing electric-type Pokémon crackling with static. Miss Juncha stepped off the sand in her polished leather boots, frowning as she approached the crowd. "Who reported this?" she demanded, voice cool and authoritative. A middle-aged man timidly raised his hand. "It was me, Miss Juncha. I saw a tropical dragon out at sea, heading this way as if it was flying in for an attack. Junsha's eyes narrowed. False alarms weren't just embarrassing, they disrupted public order, and in Fengyuan they were taken seriously. She turned toward the gentle swell of waves, the tan hull of a distant boat bobbing on the horizon. Could that shape really be a tropical dragon? She forced herself to stay calm. Across Kanto and Chengdu, her signature team of electric types, from vivacious Jolteon to sleek Electabuzz, had earned her a reputation. Here in Fengyuan, she'd specialized in even rarer thunder-type species. But a tropical dragon was an entirely different challenge. Miss Junsha inhaled deeply. "Stand back, everyone," she announced. "Let's see what's really out there." Though Junsha's face was stern, she showed no hint of fear. "Ready?" she asked. Her gaze stayed fixed on the distant sea, where a tiny black speck was slowly swelling on the horizon, too faint to notice without help. Junsha lifted her military-grade monocular and trained it on the spot. There, skimming over the water, flew a massive tropical dragon, its leathery wings beating the air, and someone perched on its broad back, though the rider's features were still indistinct. Thanks to the scope's built-in rangefinder and speed gauges, Junsha quickly estimated the dragon's size and velocity. Her jaw tightened. This was no ordinary beast, and if its rider meant harm, she wouldn't be able to stop them alone. Moreover, any elf with the skill to tame such a creature was unlikely to ride solo. Without hesitation, she snapped open the communicator, clipped to her belt. "Junsha here. Hostile dragon inbound from the southwest. All units, rally on the beach immediately." The nearby officers stiffened at her command. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across their faces. Did their captain need help? Then, seeing the resolve in Junsha's eyes, they didn't hesitate. They fanned out along the shoreline, weapons at the ready, preparing to meet whatever threat emerged from the waves. From the way everyone was hungrily devouring their melons, each person's personality seemed to shine through. Before long, several police cars rolled onto the beach, and uniformed officers from the Union spilled out, moving quickly under Miss Junsha's direction. Within moments, the crowd had been shepherded off the sand, leaving a clear open zone. Yet around its edge, curious onlookers gathered, forming a loose semicircle. Ethan, perched atop his tropical dragon at the water's edge, felt a chill creep down his spine. What was going on? Were they here to make arrests? His stomach tightened. Had someone overheard his conversation with Old Man Yagyu aboard the Sante Anu and alerted the authorities? The thought was unlikely, but even the slightest chance of capture was more than he could ignore. He squared his shoulders, mentally preparing for a quick getaway. From the looks of the hastily organized officers, it wouldn't be hard to slip past them if he had to. 3 days in the blistering sun had taken their toll on Ethan's appearance. His clothes were grimy and tattered, and unwashed hair hung limply around his face. At first glance, he might have passed for a down-and-out beggar rather than a man on the brink of flight. Yet beneath that rough exterior, he remained alert, ready to seize whatever opportunity presented itself. Ethan stood on the sun-drenched beach, still clad in what looked unmistakably like a league trainer's uniform. A few curious onlookers had gathered, but when Miss Junsha caught sight of him, she didn't raise any alarm. With a graceful wave, she simply signaled the crowd to disperse, and the murmurs died away. Suddenly, a powerful gust of wind swept across the sand as the tropical dragon descended from the sky. Its broad, palm-leaf-shaped wings scattered grains of sand like confetti. Ethan reached up and gently patted the dragon's scaled neck, urging it to land at his feet. In the days since their first meeting, he'd won the creature's trust and appetite completely. At first, the dragon had been content with Ethan's improvised barbecues, but it soon discovered something even more irresistible: the strange, nutrient-packed energy cubes he carried. Although they were only intermediate grade, these little blocks tasted like gourmet fare to a dragon that had never experienced them. Obedient to Ethan's silent command, the dragon settled onto the sand. Its great eyes flickered with soft blue light as it shifted its massive body. Then, with a thunderous beat of its wings, it lifted off again, carrying Ethan and his loyal companion, Superpower, high above the beach. From a pocket at his hip, Ethan produced a few more ordinary energy cubes and held them out. The dragon leaned down, snapping them up eagerly, and Ethan closed his hand around its snout in a quiet gesture of praise, ready for whatever adventure awaited them next. Ethan paused and looked up at Miss Junsha. After so many days adrift at sea, her lips were cracked and her voice sounded hoarse. "Miss Junsha," he asked gently, "are you all right?" She glanced at his worn, salt-stiffened clothes and for a moment relaxed the taut vigilance in her eyes. Then she recovered her composure and offered him a courteous nod. "Greetings, powerful trainer from afar," she said. "By regulation, I need to see your alliance certificate." Ethan reached into his pocket and produced his laminated ID card. Junsha took it with a professional air, brought out a handheld scanner, and swiped the card's chip. Instantly, his profile appeared on her screen, his name, rank, achievements, and detailed records of every mission. There, in bright text, was the note about his assistance on the Tyrannosaurus Beach incident in Deadleaf City, how he joined forces with the Kudaba City police to subdue the rampaging creature. Junsha studied the entry intently. As she reached the final paragraph, her expression stiffened, and her polite demeanor faded into something more guarded. Ethan noticed the shift. He tensed, his right hand slipping toward his side, ready for whatever might come next. "It looks like I haven't yet received the chapter you'd like me to polish. Could you please paste in the full text of the machine-translated chapter? Once I have that, I'll revise it, renaming Aoki to Ethan, ensuring he's male, and smoothing out the language so it reads naturally for an English-speaking audience." Chapter 265, Registering Identification Information. Ethan had barely settled into his chair when Miss Junsha stood and addressed him in a clear, resonant voice. "On behalf of every officer in the Kana precinct, I want to extend our deepest gratitude to Ethan Jun for your outstanding service. Your valor in Deadleaf City and the decisive actions you took against our enemies in Santa Anu saved countless lives and made an immeasurable contribution to regional security." At her words, the line of officers behind Junsha snapped to attention and offered a crisp salute to Ethan. Around them, the gathered crowd stirred with excitement. Although Old Man Lu Sheng had tried to keep Ethan's heroics under wraps, word of his deeds in Santa Anu had already spread throughout the district. An official bulletin, short but emphatic, had been filed under Ethan's name, crediting him with significant contributions and instructing that, should he reappear, the command post be notified immediately at extension XXXXXX. After the salute, Miss Junsha retrieved a secure alliance communicator from her belt, punched in the top priority code, and transmitted the single-line report. "Ethan Jun has arrived in Kana City." She watched the device's indicator light flicker, signaling that her message was en route. Satisfied that her duty was complete, Junsha allowed herself a small, confident nod. With the identification update sent, the wheels were now in motion, and Ethan's presence in Kana would soon be known to all the right people. Miss Junsha hardly had time to catch her breath before the crackling voice came over her communicator. "Leave Ethan in Kana City. That's an order." There was no room for argument. She forced a polite smile. After all, the speaker's league rank dwarfed her own, verging on senior league status. Obediently, she complied. Looking up, she met Ethan's curious gaze. His features were still awkwardly distorted by the recent biomod malfunction, but Junsha paid it no mind. Clearing her throat, she blurted out, "So they really did tell me to notify you the instant I arrived?" Ethan returned her nod with a crooked grin. "Yeah, my ID specifically says you're supposed to look after me." Junsha nodded again and tried to phrase her next words carefully. "All right, then. You're free to go?" He shrugged, offering her a half-hearted wave. "Go ahead. Don't worry, I won't step outside Kana City. Just keep an eye on me if you'd like." "Understood," she replied, deactivating the communicator. With one last glance at Ethan, she turned and walked away, heels clicking softly on the pavement. Ethan let out a low chuckle, relief washing over him. For now, at least, he was on his own turf, and whatever came next would be his responsibility alone. Ethan took a steady breath as he approached the checkpoint. "Thank you, Miss Junsha," he said quietly. At his words, Junsha stepped aside, and the line of city guards behind her parted, clearing a path for him. Ethan didn't bother stowing away either of his companions, the hulking, slow-moving beast or the magnificent tropical drake. Instead, he led the two elves and the creatures through the city gates together. The beast plodded along without a care, its dull eyes taking in nothing and its tail dragging aimlessly behind. The tropical drake, by contrast, craned its long neck this way and that, utterly fascinated by the bustling streets and soaring towers. Clearly, the dragon had never seen a city this grand. Junsha watched them go with a mixture of respect and unease. Ethan exuded a palpable, dangerous energy, the owned presence of someone who'd faced death too many times to count. She couldn't help but admit to herself that if her own tropical drake squared off against his, it might not be a fair fight. She'd already sent word of Ethan's arrival to her contacts. Before long, members of the water fleet could come calling, looking for a chance to strike. She'd need to stay on her guard. For now, though, she simply exhaled and watched the unlikely procession vanish into the city's heart. I muscle tense for whatever might come next. Ethan hesitated for only a moment before corralling the reluctant tropical dragons out of sight. They were simply too large. Parading them down the city's streets would draw every eye and risk snarling traffic. Their mere presence had already served as a powerful deterrent. Keeping them on display now was pointless. He scanned the skyline and spotted the tallest building nearby. Without question, the city's premier hotel. Within minutes, he'd secured one of its most extravagant suites. As soon as the ghost stone security scan cleared him, he nodded to the elves and let them loose. The suite's opulence, far surpassing even the grandest accommodations in Sante Anu, meant that a 5-meter-tall dragon would fit without incident, provided it didn't crane its neck. Ethan skipped the marble-clad bathroom and, after confirming the room was secure, retrieved his communicator. Its faceplate bore the rocket's emblem, and just below it glowed the black cloud sigil of the rocket's shadow group, proof that this was no ordinary device. He tapped the activation sequence, ready to report in. Chapter 7. Ethan sat quietly as the final words of his induction ceremony echoed off the stone walls. With that, Ying himself stepped forward and placed an encrypted communicator in Ethan's hand. "Here," Ying said, his tone low but firm. "This is your personal device, and this," he added, tapping the screen, "is your code. Use it only in emergencies. If anything goes wrong, I'll be able to reach you immediately." Back in the sparsely furnished barracks, Ethan examined the tiny gadget. Its smooth black surface bore only a single button and a small display. He entered the videocom code Ying had given him and waited for the interface to load. A text window appeared, cursor blinking. Ethan typed, "Plans are proceeding with our Alliance infiltration. Expect scrutiny from higher-ups. Cover identity has been reinforced." He pressed send and pocketed the device. For a moment, he stood still, listening to the distant drip of water in the corridor outside. A few minutes later, the communicator buzzed. Ethan retrieved it, flicked his thumb across the screen, and read the reply. Affirmative. Just one word. Ethan raised an eyebrow, then shook his head in amusement. He powered down the device and tossed it into the far corner of the training ring. It would stay out of sight. He didn't want to risk losing it. He shrugged off his tunic and trousers and stowed them on a nearby hook. Steam curled from the open doorway of the adjacent bathhouse, promising hot water and a chance to unwind. The chamber was surprisingly large, with a deep, marble-lined soaking pool at its center, and beyond that, a smaller training pool meant for laps or light sparring drills. Inside the water, 2 elves floated serenely, and beside them, a young tropical drake bobbed up and down, its iridescent scales glinting in the lamplight. Ethan slid into the steaming shower stall instead. The pool looked far too cramped for comfort, and he had no intention of wrestling a dragon in water. As warm water sluiced over his shoulders, Ethan closed his eyes and rehearsed tomorrow's objectives. Infiltrate the Alliance headquarters, gather intel on their command structure, protect his cover at all costs. The stakes had never been higher. He turned off the spray, stepped out, and toweled off, ready to face whatever challenges awaited him at dawn. Ethan had no idea his offhand comment would plunge the rocket's data division into a frenzy. The Shadow Squad's deputy leader, one of the highest-ranking officers in the entire organization, had just issued a kill order. To make sure no one could trace their target, the data team now had to elevate his Alliance status to the absolute maximum, ideally putting him on a par with the triumvirate cadres. Years of heavy investment had gone into fabricating airtight identities for those 3 senior officers. records so meticulously crafted that even the league's champions would need a forensic audit to uncover the true theft. All the data team could do for Ethan, following Ying's instructions, was boost his status just out of the Alliance King's reach. Any further enhancement would demand a direct order from boss Sakagi, and since Sakagi was currently out of contact, they'd have to petition his superior, Dr. Yuyong. For Ethan, though, this level of cover was more than sufficient. He didn't believe anyone would risk that much effort just to unearth his real identity. Chapter 7. Unmasking Ethan. No matter how much he stood out, Ethan's role was still minor in the grand scheme, yet Team Rocket was determined to expose every detail of his past. As they scrambled to plug every gap in the dossier they'd compiled, senior officials in the Pokémon League quietly launched their own background checks. If Ethan ever dared to step into the public eye, his true identity would be laid bare. League insiders would immediately recognize him as the venerable Yagyu of St. Anu, once a celebrated champion, now living incognito under a humble alias. And when that day came, there would be nowhere left for him to hide. Chapter 266, Ready to Kill. Unbeknownst to Ethan, Liu Sheng wasn't tapping into the Alliance's secure network at all. Aboard the plane, the old man had quietly logged in with his own top-level credentials to pull up Ethan's dossier. The process dragged on longer than anyone expected, yet that very delay gave the Rockets the breathing room they needed. If Ethan stepped out of the bath and messaged Ying, his cover would be blown. Fortunately for Liu Sheng, he alone possessed the rights to suppress any alarms. At last, he snapped shut the battered laptop and couldn't hide his triumph. Talent? He murmured with a sly grin. No, absolute genius. Meanwhile, in his private cabin, Ethan toweled off and plugged in his phone. The moment the screen came to life, he froze. Dozens of unread messages flooded in, most from Ogo, a few from Xiaoqian, all demanding updates. He sensed at once that something serious had happened. Ethan only had two friends he could reliably reach, Ogo and Xiaoqian. After changing into fresh robes and toweling off his hair, he picked up the in-room video phone and dialed Ogo's number. A minute passed with no answer, and Ethan was about to hang up when Ogo's face suddenly filled the screen. Dressed neatly and clearly on his way out, Ogo's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Ethan? Is that really you? Where have you been all this time?" Ethan grinned and held up the two rare materials Ogo had given him for crafting high-grade energy cubes. "Worried I'd run off with your investment?" Ogo laughed, straightening his jacket. "Good thing you called when you did. I might have been gone by the time you got through." He slipped a bag over his shoulder. Ethan cocked an eyebrow. "You're going somewhere?" "Not far," Ogo replied. "Just running an errand the old man arranged for me at home." With a quick nod, he waved goodbye and ended the call, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts and two pieces of very valuable raw material. "By the way, the other side has agreed to trade the high-capacity tank qualification upgrade method for your energy cube formula," Ethan said. "They just want to meet with you in person first." Dago's eyes lit up. This rang a bell. "Oh, right. You'd mentioned Xiaoqian and me. I hear she's been instrumental behind the scenes, and you've met her grandfather at least once, haven't you?" Ethan gave a small nod. "Exactly. Thanks for handling that. Your exclusive advanced energy cube recipe will be finished in a few days." Ethan valued Dago's help too much to let it go unrewarded. The high-tier energy block, the so-called metal monster, was Ethan's gift in return, and he'd even arranged for payment to arrive a bit ahead of schedule. Dago grinned. "That's fantastic news. Is there anything else I need to bring? Just let me know, and I'll teleport over right away." "No," Ethan replied with a shake of his head. "Everything you provided last time is exactly what I need. The rest of my designs are too bespoke to sell for a better price on the open market anyway." Ethan glanced at the data readout one more time. High-tier energy cubes carried a premium, sometimes several times the cost of the standard modules. He'd already fronted a sizable deposit to Ogo to secure the shipment. Dawu waved the concern away. "Relax," he said with the effortless confidence of someone with deep pockets. "If money can fix it, it's no problem. I'll take care of it myself." He sounded eager, impatient even. And who could blame him? His last request had been a nightmare. He'd hunted down every senior cultivator he could find, only to be told that even if they agreed to the project, It might not meet his exacting standards and would take years to complete. He had no time to spare. Quasi-elves matured slowly enough, and his metal beasts needed rare metals to grow. By the time those researchers finally delivered results, the beasts would have long since evolved into massive golden monstrosities. Ethan allowed himself a small smile. "You're in luck," he said, tapping his data chip. "I just arrived in Kaina City's Fangyuan district today. If you're not far, drop by my suite. I'll be here for the next 2 days." He thought of Junsha's introduction. Whoever she'd connected him with had to be top tier. If Dawu showed up, it would only enhance his own reputation. After all, being seen with the heir to a major German corporation was no small distinction. Ethan's words left Ogo momentarily speechless. "You're in Fangyuan, Kaina?" Ethan gave a helpless nod. "Yes. Hang tight. I'll sort everything out today and be there by tomorrow at the latest." After saying that, Ogo quickly ended the video call and bolted from the room. Those rare stones he'd discovered were tempting, but the exclusive energy module for the metal beast was even more alluring. He needed first to finish the copywriting assignment his father had set for him back at the office, then book a flight straight to Kaina City. As the heir to his family's German company, he wasn't required to manage day-to-day operations just yet, but he had to learn the business inside and out and begin taking an active role. The idea of mastering all those complex procedures and intricate negotiations was daunting, but if he wanted to prove himself as champion, there was no other way. Of course, a steady financial backing from Germany helped ease the pressure. Once the call with Ogo ended, Ethan stared at his phone for a moment. He really needed to update Xiaoqian, but he was still in his pajamas. It wouldn't matter with Dawu, they were both guys. Calling Xiaoqian felt different. He took a deep breath and tapped the screen, bracing himself for what came next. Ethan slid his phone back onto the bunk after sending a quick update to Xiaoqian. No accidents to report. Truth be told, he barely thought she was worth more than a perfunctory friend notification. Ogo, on the other hand, still held considerable value. He lay back on the soft mattress, the gentle rocking of the ship lulling him despite the midday sun streaming through the porthole. After more than 10 days at sea, even Ethan, normally unfazed by the waves, felt a trace of seasickness. It was the perfect excuse to catch up on rest. He'd meant to spend the afternoon finishing the energy cubes he'd started for Dawu, and of course, his elf companion. Most of them were already crystallized. Only a few tweaks remained. With their latest cargo secured, he didn't have to worry about sourcing materials or selling off captured elves, which were currently fetching a hefty price. Between that income and the energy crystallization profits, he'd easily cover his costs and still have enough to prepare for the showdown with Dawu. Comforted by the thought of future triumphs and a fully stocked workshop, Ethan closed his eyes and drifted into a well-deserved sleep. End of chapter. If you enjoyed this chapter, please consider subscribing, leaving a recommendation, or adding it to your favorites. Chapter 267, Fight Midnight. Fangyuan District, Kaina City. Ethan had dozed off in his hotel room, but now he woke with a start. After straightening his jacket and gathering his gear, he slipped out into the humid night air. He was headed for Kaina's Black Market, a sprawling underworld bazaar tucked away in this corner of the city. Unlike the heavily policed underground trades of Kanto or Chengdu, Fangyuan's Black Market operated with surprising freedom. It wasn't a single storefront, but an entire quarter devoted to illicit deals, stalls hawking rare Pokeballs, counterfeit badges, and mysterious chemical compounds, shady figures framing their wares under flickering neon signs. Team Rocket's reach barely extended here. In Kanto and Chengdu, they dominated the underground. Here in Fangyuan, the local crime families were too fractious to let an outside power seize control. Rival gangs might skirmish among themselves, but if an outsider, be it Team Rocket or some other organization, tried to muscle in, the families would unite to drive it off. So far, Rocket had only managed to open a tiny front, a cramped shop that whispered hints of black market traffic, but never threatened local rule. Ethan navigated the labyrinthine alleys, the sounds of haggling Pokémon and traders calling out their goods echoing off the walls. Lanterns cast long shadows as he pressed deeper into the maze. He knew what he was here for, and he had to stay alert. In this place, A wrong turn or a careless word could cost far more than just his reputation. Tonight's mission was delicate. He needed information on a new shipment rumored to contain experimental Pokeballs, ones capable of subduing even the toughest gym leader's champions. Reports said the cargo was crossing into Kana within hours. If Ethan could intercept it, he wouldn't just cripple Team Rocket's operations, he'd save countless trainers from falling into disastrous traps. But first, he had to find his contact, a middleman known only as Cricket, who operated out of a mahjong den nestled behind a tea house. Ethan approached the old wooden door, its paint peeling, and wiped his damp palms on his trousers. This was it. He knocked once, then twice. From the other side, a voice rasped, "Name?" "Ethan," he replied evenly. "I'm here for Cricket." A heavy pause, then the bolt slid back. The door creaked open, revealing a dim interior strewn with low tables and hushed gamblers. A single lantern burned overhead. "Follow me," said the voice, and Ethan stepped into the shadows, ready for whatever came next. One of the main reasons the Ultimate Trial was launched is that the Rockets had virtually no influence beyond the Kanto and Chengdu regions. Even a modest league presence there still outmatched the Rockets, and over time, the gap would only grow. At the very least, the league's regional championships and the prestigious 4-day King titles preserved its reputation. Ethan didn't linger. He headed straight for Kana City's black market. The Hunters Guild, rooted in Chengdu and Kanto, had grown strong thanks to its alliance with the Rockets. Yet compared to the Rockets' strict hierarchy, the Guild's casual, business-first approach won over local powers, allowing them to establish their own clubs in the city's underground trading district. They didn't seek land or political clout. Their sole purpose was buying and selling elves. For every criminal faction looking to cash in on captured elves, the Hunters Guild was the most reliable and lucrative customer. Kana City's Hunters Guild might technically be a branch of the Rocket Corporation, but its business here remains incredibly strong. Ethan strode into the guild hall and laid out his latest trophies: 2 wild tengu from the unknown isle, a venomous white butterfly queen, a battle-worn swallowtail matron, and a pair of fully mature loomis mushrooms. When the guild officials tallied the haul, Ethan walked away with 2 million alliance coins and 2 million hunter points. The tengu commanded the highest prices, but the butterfly queen and swallow-tail matron, weakened during capture, fetched far less than their peak value. Still, the 2 million points pushed Ethan's career total past the 5 million mark. With that milestone reached, he officially earned the rank of 3-star hunter. Just one more rank, 4-star, and he'll be able to form his own hunting party, take on the guild's lucrative group contracts, and start really turning a profit. Of course, going from 3 to 4 stars is said to be 10 times more difficult than his leap to this point. Ethan smirked to himself as he pocketed his coins. The real challenge is only beginning. Fortunately, Ethan's finances were solid enough for now, so there was no need to rush. After harvesting 2 million Union coins, his total stood at 5.2 million, and a full million of that had come courtesy of Takuya, the Imamura Santianu. Once he left the Hunters Guild, Ethan made a beeline for the elven goods shop secretly run by the underground forces in Kana City. His goal was to restock the most critical ingredient for the elves' exclusive high-level energy blocks, the single most valuable component. His supply of custom energy cubes was nearly gone, and if he wanted to maintain his accelerated energy growth, he had to secure an even rarer grade than before. On top of that, having absorbed Ghoststone's poisonous gas, Ethan needed these energy-rich materials to further develop his mastery of the poison system. By the time he walked out of the shop, his bank card was nearly empty. The shipment he'd just purchased, large quantities of the highest-grade energy blocks, had cost him 3 million alliance coins alone. He'd also picked up all the specialized gear Ogo's metal monsters required. With his resources now stretched thin, Ethan knew he would have to plan his next moves carefully, but for the moment, he was ready to push forward. Ethan's mind was still occupied with elf-related matters. With the latest batch of gear finally completed, he wouldn't need to worry about energy cubes for the next 2 months. Seizing the moment, he invested 2 million alliance coins in equipment designed to help his elves train more effectively and hone their combat prowess. Training elves is notoriously resource-intensive. The higher their level, the steeper the consumption of supplies. In a short span, Ethan's elves had advanced so rapidly that pushing for even faster level-ups was neither practical nor efficient. Instead, their regimen would now focus on mastering existing skills, refining each ability until it reached full mastery, before moving on to more advanced drills. Accordingly, Ethan's latest purchases were tools for stable long-term growth rather than flashy new upgrades. 1. A reinforced load-bearing harness for the Dark Crow. The creature's increasing weight had exceeded the specs of its old gear, so Ethan ordered a model rated for up to 200 kilograms. Perfect timing, since its next evolution is just around the corner. 2. A set of ritual prayer beads for the silent beasts. These beads are imbued with minor enchantments to calm and focus the creatures during meditation and light combat exercises. 3. A UU Read training simulator. This compact device not only guides users through customized exercise routines, but also measures and records superpower output in real time, giving Ethan precise feedback on each elf's progress. With these tools in hand, Ethan felt confident the elves would consolidate their newfound strengths and prepare for the challenges ahead, transforming raw potential into dependable mastery. Ethan knew the Ghost Stone's poison system still had a long way to go, so he decided to tackle two problems at once: refining its toxin and strengthening his own body. First, he ordered another batch of toxin-compatible gas, almost identical in quality to the last lot, and set about integrating it with the Ghost Stone's internal framework. He worked methodically, careful not to push the system beyond its current limits. At the same time, Ethan realized his physical strength hadn't kept pace with his rapidly improving ability, IES. To fix that, he invested in a high-tech training vest, essentially a wearable resistance device that would help him build muscle and coordination while practicing his moves. It hugged his torso and limbs snugly, providing just the right amount of extra weight and feedback without restricting his agility. Nutrition was equally important. Ethan didn't pry into the details of every supplement his trainer suggested. He trusted her judgment as long as his workouts remained balanced and his health stayed on track. He did, however, splurge on what was reputed to be the finest calcium supplement on the market, partly to support his body's accelerated growth, and partly because at this stage, every advantage counted. Meanwhile, his scorpion familiar, once no bigger than a thumbnail, had already grown to ordinary scorpion size. A quick diagnostic scan of the creature's biochip confirmed it could still expand. Intrigued, Ethan opened up the habitat to let it stretch its legs and see how large it might become. He was betting on big things. A larger scorpion would translate into a more formidable Dragon King scorpion stage with vastly improved stats. Most exciting of all was the prospect of channeling that newly acquired poison gas attribute into the scorpion's own venom system. If it worked, his clawed companion would develop a uniquely powerful toxin, one more weapon in Ethan's arsenal as he continued pushing both himself and the Ghost Stone toward their full potential. Ethan finished spending like water, and now only 200,000 Union coins remained on him. He still had 4 skill CDs in his possession, originally meant to train the foolish beast, but after his recent burst of growth, he realized it might be unwise to absorb too many new abilities at once. Better to hold on to them for the right moment. Third update. Thinking about a monthly pass, recommendation tickets, subscriptions? Send them in. Keep those requests coming. Let me know what poses or scenes you want to see next. Chapter 268, Worship. The next morning, Ethan rubbed his sore shoulders and yawned as he drew back the curtains, letting the warm sunlight flood into the workshop. He'd spent the entire night forging energy blocks, and every muscle in his body protested the effort. Just as he was about to sink onto a stool, a sharp knock sounded at the door. Ethan opened it to find a compact, silver-haired man nearly his own height, grinning broadly. "You rotten kid!" The stranger teased, ruffling Ethan's hair so hard it almost knocked him off balance. "Don't you ever think of sneaking out on me again?" Ethan recognized him at once. "Master Liu Sheng!" he exclaimed, stepping aside to let the older man enter. Despite the playful reproach, there was no mistaking the sheer power radiating from this Uranus-level cultivator. Ethan led him to the small sitting area by the entrance, heart pounding. Liu Sheng sank into the sofa with a satisfied sigh. Did you know I dropped everything the moment I got your message? I raced from Dead City to Golden City, then chartered winged elk transport straight to the Fengyuan region. Elf couriers and I made record time, arrived before dawn. He waved a hand, and a silver tray appeared between them, bearing pastries and steaming tea. I've come all this way to see you. You must be important to someone very high up in the Alliance. Ethan swallowed hard. He had anticipated that word of his breakthrough might spread, but he never expected such swift intervention from someone of Master Liu Sheng's stature. Thank you for coming, he managed, pouring tea for his guest. I apologize for not notifying you sooner. Master Liu chuckled. There's no need for apologies, boy. But now that I'm here, we'd best get down to business. The Alliance has high hopes for those energy blocks you're producing. He sipped his tea, eyes gleaming with excitement. Tell me everything from the beginning. Ethan set his brushes and inkstone carefully on the boat's low railing, preparing to finish the characters he'd begun. Mr. Liu Sheng lifted his teacup, took a deliberate sip of the steaming brew, and set it back down with a soft clink. Hurry up, he said crisply. Keep your ink from bleeding. I have other appointments after this. Caught off guard, Ethan froze. Mr. Liu Sheng's eyes narrowed as he studied him. You came aboard this riverboat on purpose, didn't you? To pay your respects and acknowledge me as your master, he said, nodding toward the half-written calligraphy. I thought so. The elders you mentioned, some of them are my old friends. If you intend to bow, do it quickly. I have more pressing matters waiting. He surveyed Ethan like a rare seedling he intended to cultivate before any rivals could claim him. Ethan's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to comply. Yes, Master Liu, he said, voice trembling just slightly. Mindful not to smudge his work, Ethan picked up the porcelain teacup with both hands and stepped forward. He knelt on one knee, held the cup out before him, and bowed his head. Master, he murmured with all the respect he could muster. A satisfied smile touched Mr. Liu Sheng's lips as he accepted the tea. He inhaled its fragrant steam, lifted the cup, and drank deeply. In that moment, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders, his future, at last, firmly within the grasp of the teacher he so revered. In the Elven realms, it's customary, even among master-apprentice pairs, to address one's mentor as teacher. There's no rule against pledging yourself to more than one master, but your first teacher always holds the deepest significance. Teacher Liu Sheng made sure Ethan understood that from the start. I've already told you my surname is Liu, and my given name is Sheng, he reminded, his tone firm yet patient. My full name is Liu Shenggang. I want you all to know it now, so you won't wander around calling me teacher without ever learning my name. Ethan filed that name away. Liu Shenggang, Alliance Senior Cultivator, Heavenly King, ranked powerhouse. In his mind, that made Teacher Liu a formidable patron indeed. Before Ethan could indulge in any fantasies of leveraging his master's reputation, Liu Sheng cut him off with a wry smile. Don't think you'll gain instant favors just by dropping my name at every turn, the older man warned. Few people outside our order even recognize it, and those who do are old-timers who won't do you any favors. If you want to succeed, you'll have to rely on your own strength. I'm hardly rolling in wealth myself, otherwise I wouldn't have ended up taking that odd currency exchange job with Yamamoto. Yes, teacher, Ethan said promptly, bowing his head in respect. He knew better than to treat even a heavenly king's name as a guarantee of easy rewards. After all, titles might open doors, but it was personal effort that kept them open. Ethan never cared much for titles. He'd only asked for an honorable standing, not for the perks Mr. Yanagisho would hand out tomorrow. So when Elder Liu Sheng finally welcomed him into the order, the old man let out a contented sigh. Around them, the other veterans couldn't help but swell with pride. After all, they now had a fresh prodigy to back up their boasts. Your gift for breeding is remarkable, Liu Sheng said, his tone half admonishing, half encouraging. Don't abandon it lightly. If you're drawn to the path of cultivation, I won't stand in your way. But remember, our time and energy are finite. It's nearly impossible to master both arts. He leaned forward, eyes bright with conviction. I've devoted my life to one craft and reached my limits. You, however, possess something rare, Should you decide to specialize in nurturing cultivators, I'm confident you could ascend to the very pinnacle. Ethan met his gaze without flinching. In Lu Sheng's mind, he was the most promising young breeder the Order had ever seen, and he didn't want that potential diluted by a second vocation. With a soft chuckle, the elder laid a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Of course, he added, the choice remains yours. But mark my words, if you commit yourself fully to becoming a top-tier beast breeder, the strength your creatures will wield is beyond imagination. You can feel it already, can't you? It might just leave you a touch weaker in competitive settings. Ethan nodded in agreement. He fully understood how much breeders gained when developing elves, but unlike most people facing this choice, it wasn't a difficult decision for him. Thanks to his unique ability to produce energy cubes directly from data chips, any so-called time loss was irrelevant. As long as a chip held sufficient information, Ethan could manufacture any variety of energy cube on demand. He simply couldn't disclose that fact. No one would believe him, and it would raise questions he wasn't ready to answer. When he was younger, Ethan never grasped the implications of juggling two professions. Now, as both a king-level trainer and an advanced breeder, he was trying to excel at both, and the result was that neither career had reached its potential. His progress felt sluggish, as if he'd spent half his life waking up from a dream. His mentor had confided his own experiences once, but had assumed Ethan might dismiss them outright. The choice is yours, he'd said. Remember, you're only 15, turning 16 soon. If you haven't become a king-level trainer by the time you're 20, I want you to reconsider your path. Don't waste your life chasing something that isn't meant for you. Chapter 8. The Cost of Ambition. Ethan stood before Mr. Lu Sheng, absorbing every word. At 16 years old, he had exactly 4 years to prove himself. If he couldn't ascend to the rank of Uranus-class trainer in that time, he didn't belong in this profession. He'd be no better than the small-time operators in Team Rocket, destined to be weeded out by the harsh realities of the field. In their world, elimination often meant death. Mr. Lu's voice was calm but unwavering. With this complete set of data chips, he said, tapping the sleek metallic case at his side, you have every tool you need, but tools alone aren't You must push yourself, relentlessly, over the next 4 years. Only then can you hope to earn a senior breeder's license. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over Ethan. I've told you what you need to know. Now it's your choice. My job is to guide you. Yours is to decide how hard you're willing to fight. Ethan straightened his shoulders and met his mentor's gaze. I understand, sir. I won't waste this chance. Mr. Lu flashed a faint, approving smile and tucked the data chips into his coat pocket. Good. Now go make your mark. As Ethan turned to leave, a sudden commotion rose from the back of the training hall. Dozens of hopeful breeders clamored around a display table stacked with prototype data modules. Their shouts echoed off the walls. 4th grade modules. Who'll bid higher? Don't miss out on these rare gene samples. How much are you willing to pay? Ethan paused for a moment, watching the frenzy of negotiation. Each desperate plea, each raised bid, reminded him how fiercely people fought for any edge in this world. Success favored the bold, and he was determined not just to join the fray, but to rise above it. With a final glance at the buzzing crowd, Ethan stepped forward into the bright morning light, ready to begin his 4-year crusade toward Uranus-class greatness. Chapter 269. Zaidahu Father Lu Sheng had been detailing the history of the elves to Ethan for nearly 2 hours when a knock sounded at the door. You've been busy today, Father, Lu Sheng remarked with a wry smile, leaning back in his chair. Ethan rose and opened the heavy oak door to reveal a young man dressed in elegant attire, his posture exuding quiet confidence. Dawu, Ethan greeted him warmly, stepping aside to invite him in. Dawu returned Ethan's smile with a respectful nod, then turned to address Father Lu Sheng, who was seated by the hearth. He paused at the threshold, bowed deeply, and said, Master Lu Sheng, I greet you. Lu Sheng waved him forward, his eyes alight with approval. Ah, the son of the Jiaofu family. Very good, very good. A novice druid who befriends Dawu, the young master of the Druid Council, is someone to be proud of. Your talents speak for themselves. Legend has it that people tend to cluster together, and those who keep company with geniuses often become geniuses themselves. At Master Lu Sheng's remark, Dawu offered a modest smile and inclined his head. Lu Sheng was an old friend of Dawu's father, and when an elder, especially one of heavenly king rank and a senior cultivator at that, spoke, courtesy demanded full attention. "All right, young friends, carry on with your conversation. I must return to my experiment. It's far from finished." Master Lu Sheng rose from his seat, brushing imaginary dust from his robes. Then he turned to Ethan. "Ethan, remember what I told you. You have exceptional talent. Don't let it go to waste." "Yes, teacher," Ethan replied, voice steady and respectful. Lu Sheng watched the earnest look on Ethan's face and shook his head gently. The young man's promise was heartfelt, but Liu Sheng had known him long enough to suspect how easily such vows slipped from a youth's lips. Nodding once more, he slipped away into the corridor, leaving the group to their discussions. Ethan closed the door behind him and exhaled wearily, rubbing the sweat from his brow. Man, that was stressful. Ogo, who had been watching him with interest, rose and circled the room as if trying to take it all in again. Finally, he stopped in front of Ethan and asked, "Ethan, you said there's an elder back home. Would that be Mr. Lu Sheng?" Ethan gave him a puzzled look, then shook his head and sank onto the sofa. At the same moment, Ogo's expression lit up. "So it is him, isn't it?" "Yeah," Ethan replied. "He's one of the old guard masters my father used to talk about, someone capable of developing a specialized energy rod formula that rare and so quickly. Dad's mentioned him countless times before he disappeared a few years back. I never imagined I'd actually meet him here." Ogo grew more and more animated, weaving his own embellishments into the story. Ethan stifled a laugh. None of that was his doing. He reached into his spatial ring, withdrew a sleek, finely crafted container, and set it on the table. "Here's the energy cube you requested," he said, "but just so you know, the specifications have changed slightly." He couldn't completely eliminate the extra bulk this energy cube would add to Dawu's metal fiend, but at least he could keep its weight gain to a bare minimum. And since the cube still delivered all the nutrients the creature needed for healthy growth, it might even be more efficient than standard rations. Ethan winced as he finished the last cut. He'd just crystallized that half-fist-sized burst of medium-grade energy they'd harvested from the uncharted island, and then painstakingly split the resulting crystal into 8 equal shards. Would such a tiny fragment really do the job? Dawu's eyes flared with excitement. He popped open his elf ball, summoned his metal fiend, and set it before them. Ethan raised his scanner and watched the data stream in. A smile tugged at his lips when he saw the monster's new level. It had jumped from 30 to 35 in record time. Dawu's training methods were incredible. No side effects, and none of the creature's other tats had suffered. Without a second thought, Dawu snapped open the crystal case, plucked out one of Ethan's energy shards, and slid it into the metal fiend's energy port. The creature's plated armor pulsed with light as it absorbed the shard, its antennae quivering with satisfaction. "Perfect," Dawu exclaimed, turning to Ethan with a broad grin and a thumbs up. "That's one powerful boost." Ethan Jun leaned against the edge of the workbench, brushing a trickle of sweat from his forehead. Across from him, Ogo folded his arms and offered a wide grin. "Ethan, you were incredible back there," Ogo began. "By the way, let's square things up. Figure out what I owe you." Ethan rolled his eyes. He'd been about to speak when Ogo cut him off. "Don't refuse," Ogo added with a laugh. "You know I've got more than enough credits. We're friends, but that doesn't mean I can't settle my debts." "Whoever said I'd refuse?" Ethan replied, arching an eyebrow. "I just thought you were a little overeager to interrupt." He paused, then softened his tone. "Honestly, you don't need to pay me in credits. Besides, you helped me sell the Energy Cube blueprint. I've yet to properly thank you for that." Ogo waved him off. "No need. I haven't even closed the sale on the blueprint yet, to be honest. But you're right. Talking money can be awkward. So tell me what you want. If I can get it, consider it yours." Ethan tapped his chin thoughtfully. "All right, I have a few ideas. A high-grade darkstone would be ideal. Failing that, a razor claw of exceptional quality, something with a flawless cut. Or, if you can swing it, a royal seal. Though I know those come with a premium price tag. If it's too steep, just let me know. I'll find another way." Ogo's grin grew even wider. "Consider it done. I'll let you know as soon as I've tracked one of those down. Ethan nodded, relief washing over him. At least for now, his next big acquisition was in capable hands. Ethan sat across from Dawu in the quiet study, the only light coming from a single oil lamp on the table. Spread before him were 3 parchment slips, each bearing the name of an evolution catalyst: Darkstone, Sharp Claw, and the King's Emblem. He tapped the first sheet. This Darkstone will trigger my Dark Crow's next evolution. The Sharp Claw, he pointed to the second, is Paula's key, and this, he lifted the third parchment, the King's Emblem, will let my Null Beast ascend into the Hippopotamus King. Even though it hasn't decided which form it wants, I need all 3 items ready in advance. Dawu studied the list, frowning. As heir to Schwarzfeld Trading, he knew exactly how rare and how valuable such relics could be. I understand the stones and claws, he said slowly, but that King's Emblem, I'm not keen on taking responsibility for something so legendary. Ethan leaned forward. I'm not asking you to guard it forever. Just keep an eye out. If you learn of a credible lead, send word immediately. In the meantime, focus on finding high-grade dark stones and sharp claws. We can worry about the emblem once we have a solid opportunity. After a moment's hesitation, Dawu gave a curt nod. All right, I'll do my best. Ethan folded the parchments, relief spreading through him. With Dawu's help hunting stones and claws, and a promise that the King's Emblem would follow as soon as a lead emerged, he felt confident. Soon, all 3 of his companions would stand on the brink of powerful new evolutions. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then spoke quietly. If I could have my way, I'd keep Cocodora at my side forever. He thought of the powerful family who'd spared his life, only because he'd done what they asked. If he hadn't delivered for them, they never would have shown him an ounce of mercy. Even now, he was still paying off that debt. All the generous rewards he'd once enjoyed, for producing heirs, for winning the favor of his elder brothers, were gone. He couldn't help but miss those days when he got to change his outfit 3 times a day. Those were the only times he'd felt truly free. Chapter 270, I Have One at Home. When Ethan casually mentioned Cocodora, Ogo froze. Cocodora, those delicate forest elves, were said to exist only in the Fengyuan region, and even there they were nearly extinct. For most people, they were a legend. For Ogo, however, this was no problem at all. He threw back his head and laughed. Cocodora? That's easy. I happen to own a mine on my family's land, full of steel elves. Come with me, and I'll show you. If you find any Cocodora you like, they're yours, free of charge. Ethan's brow shot up in disbelief. A mine? Of steel elves? Are you saying you keep iron dumbbells? Ogo's guffaw cut off midair. He shifted uncomfortably. Well, yeah, but about those iron dumbbells, I might not have official clearance to give them away. Ethan grinned. Relax, I'm kidding. I couldn't afford a mine full of elves or a pile of iron weights, even if I wanted them. That'd hardly solve anything. He'd only meant to tease Ogo with an absurd image, but to his surprise, Ogo's face turned earnest. The confidence returned to his eyes as he leaned forward. Ethan, if you really are interested, Ogo said quietly, I can speak with my father. He and Father Lu Sheng go way back. Between the 2 of them, I'm sure they could swing permission for you. Ethan held up a hand, laughing to diffuse the tension. No, really, I was only joking. I've got neither the resources nor the need for iron dumbbells or steel elves. Thanks for the offer, though. Ogo shrugged, a half-smile returning to his lips. The 2 friends fell into a lighter conversation, the impossible notion of a private mine fading into the realm of ribbing and jest. Yet beneath the banter lingered the unspoken truth. In this world of rare species and secret reserves, anything might exist, if you knew the right people to ask. Ethan shook his head with a wry smile. I can't afford a Coca-Cola just yet, he admitted. What he really needed was a tough, high HP frontliner, and Coca-Cola was the best option available right now, especially since the old man in front of him would eventually breed a fully evolved Boscodra for his steel champion. Whether in its Coca-Cola form or already grown into Boscodra, it was exactly what his team was missing. The old man, Ogo, chuckled and waved a gnarled hand. No problem, son. Whenever you're ready, just let me know. Come by the mine on my property and I'll show you where to find them. I'll admit, there aren't many elves roaming the wild wilderness area, but if you're after steel-type elves, you'll have your pick. The moment Ogo mentioned the wild wilderness area, Ethan's heart skipped a beat. That had to be where the mini dragons lived, the only ones not under the Yulong family's control. If they were still out there, hidden in the wilderness, this might be his one chance to add a dragon to his roster. Ethan couldn't shake the memory of that miniature dragon and the strange Hakron he'd glimpsed when he first entered the wilderness zone. Part of him itched to confront it head-on, but the creature was already quasi-god class. Without a super evolution, its speed and power still placed it among the elite quasi-gods. He knew he wasn't ready yet. Hakron's raw strength meant it wasn't a fight he needed to pick just now, and besides, Ethan himself lacked the guarantee of sufficient power to bond with a quasi-god-class elf unless he remained tethered to Mr. Liu Sheng every moment, a condition the Rockets would never allow. Better to wait, watch, and gather more information before making any move. Later, in the mess hall, Ogo couldn't hide her curiosity. "So, Ethan," she said over her tray, "I heard you spent 10 days drifting at sea this trip. Did you see anything wild? Any strange, never-before-seen stones?" Ethan shrugged, pushing his hair back. "Not really. I was on deck most of the time, just sun and surf, nothing more." Ogo's eyes gleamed. Sure, but I also heard you made quite the entrance when you finally returned. Rumor has it you showed up riding a massive tropical dragon?" Ethan shook his head with a brisure. "I smile. If only," he replied. "Trust me, if I ever do find one of those, you'll be the first to know." "Care to join me?" Ogo asked, his tone casual. Ethan forced a bitter smile. He knew the tropic dragon he commanded wasn't weak, but dragons obeyed only their own will, and this one hated fighting. Without summoning other elves or wild beasts, Ethan still fell short of matching Dawu's strength, and Ogo's mechanical guardians alone wouldn't change the balance. Was this truly Ogo's ultimate champion? Hardly. Even if a metal golem could evolve into its golden colossus form, it required 2 such constructs to do so, and that might not even be the pinnacle of power. After all, Dawu's arsenal extended far beyond clockwork monstrosities. His Boscadora and armored griffons were legendary spirits in their own right. "I'll pass, for now," Ethan said. "There's still a gap between us. Next time we come to your mines, I'll be ready." Ogo regarded him in surprised silence. It wasn't Ethan's admission of weakness that caught his attention, but the unshakable confidence behind his words, that when they met again, Ethan truly believed he could stand on equal footing. That kind of certainty was rare, even for someone recognized as the strongest among his peers. Ogo lounged against the wooden rail of the training ground, his confidence radiating stronger than the midday sun. Ethan, still only 16 and a few years Ogo's junior, watched him with eager eyes. "Think you'll manage to beat me the next time we spar?" Ogo asked, a slow grin spreading across his face. Ethan said nothing, letting his mind drift to his most powerful Pokémon, his gleaming Steelix, imagining the day it might carry him to victory. At that, Ogo chuckled and nodded. "All right then." He stretched, as if shrugging off the challenge already set before them. "So, what are your plans now?" Ogo inquired. Though he had more work to finish at the gym, he'd come rushing over to meet Ethan first. Ethan hesitated a moment, then spoke. "I'll be away for a while. Traveling, training. Before I head out on my own journey, I'd like to stop in Purple City and work with the gym there." "Purple City?" Ogo's eyes lit up. "That's a great spot. Battle trainers at every corner. I was actually heading back to Kanaz, but why don't I come with you to Purple City first? After that, you'll head on, and I'll return home." Ethan bit his lip. "Wouldn't that delay you?" Ogo waved him off. "No worries. Even if it slows me down a bit, what's the rush? Let's take some time for ourselves. Enjoy life while we can, because if we don't, we'll regret it later." Ethan nodded, a warm satisfaction settling over him. For the moment, nothing mattered more than the promise of the road ahead, and the adventures waiting in Purple City. Many admired Ogo's life, but he himself felt no attraction to it. Only the weight of his responsibilities kept him from walking away. He allowed himself personal pursuits only until the day he would formally assume his duties. This arrangement had the full consent of Dawu's father, the Zvich family elders, and the senior executives of the German company. In their eyes, Dawu was the perfect heir, brilliant in his studies, rigorously training himself to become an exceptional coach, and already mastering everything the company required. They called him a genius, and with good reason. In truth, Ethan was no less extraordinary than Ogo. Not only did he carry the hard-won experience of the first Quasi-King, but he also possessed an incredibly powerful advantage, a strategic chip few others could rival. In many ways, Ethan stood on equal footing with Ogo. Chapter 271, Forging a Partnership. The sun rode high in the afternoon sky as the caravan set out from Kenna City toward Zijing City, a journey of over 100 kilometers. Above them, a sleek tropical dragon and its companion, a great helmfin bird, cut through the air without a hint of hesitation. Word had spread that they were en route to Shiori City, where Ethan and his friend Ogo awaited. Ogo had long dreamed of flying on the back of a tropical dragon. Although dragons and elves were familiar to each other in the wilds of Fengyuan, tropical dragons were exceptionally rare, usually sighted only along the seacoast. Ogo, ever fascinated by precious stones, spent most of his time prospecting in the old forests high in the mountains. There, dragons seldom ventured, and even when hunters did spot one, they rarely attempted to tame it. Dawu, for instance, preferred the steadfast loyalty of steel elves over the capricious temperament of dragons. But today was different. Curiosity had finally won out, and Ogo begged Ethan to join him on this daring adventure. To his surprise, Ethan agreed. Yet the dragon itself remained aloof, refusing to promise anything as commonplace as a rest stop for dinner. A Yalong elf by birth, it insisted on retaining its dignity. In the end, the dragon struck a simple bargain. It would carry Ethan and Ogo through the skies, but nothing more. It owed them no favors, and they owed it no responsibilities, only the unspoken acknowledgement of strength between rider and mount. As the caravan rolled on below, Ethan looked up at the massive iridescent wings beating steadily against the blue. He had never met this dragon before, and the dragon had no reason to trust him. Still, each recognized in the other a shared determination. Above the treetops and mountain passes, a new alliance was taking shape, one born of curiosity, respect, and the promise of a journey neither would soon forget. Dawu shot Tropicalis, that massive emerald-scaled tropical dragon, a hard look, and the creature visibly recoiled. When Ogo stepped forward to mount it, Tropicalis snarled and batted him away. With no other option, Ogo clambered onto his own armored bird. Admittedly, armored birds aren't slow or weak by any stretch, but after watching Ethan sprawled comfortably across Tropicalis's broad back with room to spare, Ogo felt positively cramped. The bird's metal plating seemed skimpy, so poorly fitted it almost felt shoddy. Ogo's armored bird, gender male, level 38, type steel flying, ability keen eye, held item metal film. Genetic moves, drill peck, stealth rock, bulk up, whirlwind level up moves, leer, peck, sand attack, metal claw, air slash, double team, slash, aerial ace, gust, triangle attack, quick attack, wing attack. TMHM moves, snore, heavy slam, tailwind, iron defense. TM learner, rock tomb, endeavor, ice shard, roost, roar, return, swords dance. Ethan glanced over the bird's stats and couldn't help smirking. So this is Chigo's prized show-off Pokémon, huh? He muttered. The question hung in the humid air as both riders settled in for what promised to be an interesting journey. How much does a swords dance TM even cost? Ethan muttered under his breath. Across the clearing, Ogo's Skarmory, the steel-clad avian Pokémon renowned as one of his core battlers, hovered with effortless poise. It wasn't Ogo's strongest creature, but against it, none of Ethan's Pokémon stood a chance. In terms of sheer ability, Ethan had been soundly outmatched. Is he serious? Ethan thought, heart-pounding. Is this the level of a future champion? It's terrifying. As Ethan reeled from the defeat, Ogo shot a resentful glance at Ethan's Tropius. But Tropius paid him no mind, soaring proudly against the bright sky. Its speed was impressive, yet the Skarmory seemed almost relaxed, clearly holding back. The fact that it could lift and maneuver in full metal armor without T-strain spoke volumes about its rigorous training. And that armor was barely more than a thin metal shell, adding extra weight for conditioning. Ethan winced, regretting his earlier confidence. Next time he met Ogo in battle, he vowed he'd be ready. If he truly wanted to match Ogo's strength, he could never afford to let his training lapse, and he would start now. Ethan spent the flight to Zijing City, finalizing his plan to enhance the elves' qualifications. Back on that unnamed island, he'd instructed his chip to analyze the most efficient, high-impact way for the elves to channel those medium-sized energy crystals. By the time he returned to Kina City, the chip had already generated its recommendations. They simply hadn't been put into action yet. Now, in Azalea, Ethan intended to roll out those upgrades one step at a time. He also had a pending arrangement with the big milk tank farm to improve the milk tank qualification. They'd agreed in principle. All that remained was an in-person meeting. Unfortunately, Ethan couldn't spare the time until the ultimate trial concluded. In any case, boosting the milk tank certification wouldn't drastically alter his combat effectiveness. After all, its role was more caretaker and aid than frontline warrior. Perched atop their elves' backs, Ethan and Ogo chatted as the two creatures glided through the sky. Ogo couldn't hide his admiration for Ethan's expertise. True, Ethan wasn't the strongest fighter, yet for someone several years younger and with far fewer resources, his ingenuity and breadth of knowledge were nothing short of impressive. In Ogo's eyes, Ethan was formidable, not with muscle, but with his intellect. And Ethan, for his part, couldn't help but admire Ogo's wealth. It seemed to be on display at every turn. Dawu, by contrast, carried himself with a quiet elegance and the bearing of old nobility. He never meant to flaunt his fortune, yet some of the things he mentioned could cut almost as deeply as any insult. Take the time, Ethan asked him. What ingredients do you usually use when feeding elves? Specifically, those that don't involve energy blocks, the sort of thing Ghost Stone uses to produce toxic gas. Without missing a beat, Dawu would name some outrageously expensive compound and then nod, yes, it's very costly. Every time Ethan heard that, he nearly leapt across the table to sock him. In truth, it was Ethan and Ogo who kept the conversation circling back to these details. Ogo, whenever he dealt with others, maintained perfect courtesy, though Ethan suspected that his politeness was as much a shield as a social grace, a way to keep everyone at arm's length. Dawu's pride, on the other hand, was genuine. Whether in his family's circles, on the elf battleground, or showcasing his personal talents, he carried himself with an unshakable confidence. But unlike many proud men, he never had to shout it from the rooftops. It simply radiated from within. Ethan carried himself with the ease of a born leader, and Ogo treated him not as a rival but as a true friend, so much so that he never bothered to hold anything back in their conversations. After all, wasn't Ethan the gifted apprentice of Master Lu Sheng, an intermediate-tier breeder with encyclopedic knowledge of the elves? He might not yet rival Ogo in raw combat power, but Ethan's youth excused any shortcomings. In Ogo's mind, Ethan was more than qualified to stand as his peer. To Ogo, greatness belonged with greatness. Only someone exceptional could truly appreciate another exceptional person. Befriending a novice? Unthinkable. How could two people ever connect if they didn't speak the same language of skill and ambition? So whenever they talked, the distance between them vanished, replaced by a genuine mutual respect. Ethan himself had approached the friendship with an ulterior motive. He needed allies, and Ogo's talents made him a valuable one. Yet as their talks deepened, Ethan couldn't deny that something real had formed. Even if destiny ever pitted them against each other, he would remember Ogo as a fry, and if they ever found themselves fighting side by side, that friendship might bloom into an unbreakable bond. Time passed swiftly, and before the two of them, Zijing's silhouette slowly came into view. Chapter 272, The Manor. The sun was just rising over Pansy City when Ethan and Ogo stopped on the outskirts to say their goodbyes. Ogo had decided to return to Kanaz and finish what he'd left unfinished, while Ethan's path led him into the heart of Pansy City, to help his elves adapt, master new battle techniques, and level up through real fights. Pansy City sits squarely in the center of the Fengyuan region, a bustling crossroads that may not be the richest or most glamorous city in the area, but is undeniably one of its largest. Highways and rail lines crisscross here, and the city's open-air arenas on every corner draw trainers from far and wide. Known affectionately as the City of Joy, Pansy is famous for its colorful, friendly skirmishes, where the spectacle of dazzling moves and the camaraderie between elf and trainer matter more than the final score. Rather than heading straight for the Elven Center or the famed Grand Battle Ring, Ethan made his way toward the quieter edge of town. There stood the modest manor he had inherited. a two-story stone house with ivy trailing up its facade and a small courtyard out back. It was here, away from the crowds and noise, that he would settle in, set up a training ground, and devote himself fully to forging a bond between master and companion that would carry them toward ever greater heights. With Ogo's wave fading in the distance, Ethan pushed open the manor gates, feeling a surge of determination. The real work was just beginning. Ethan decided to hire a more reliable agency to secure a manor on the outskirts of Zijing. He'd come to Doraemon City mainly to train his elves in combat, but not only for fighting's sake. His original plan had been to boost their levels through wilderness survival and arena battles. Now, however, their experience was climbing so rapidly that it no longer made sense to throw them into the fray immediately. First, he had to help them solidify their fundamentals. Once they'd mastered their bodies and abilities, the real tests could begin. Thanks to Ethan's generous deposit, the agency quickly found him a modest yet spacious two-story villa set back on a broad parcel of land. The lease cost him 100,000 Aoki coins for 1 month, a necessary outlay, since in less than 4 weeks he'd be attending the rocket's final flight trial. Whether it could truly soar into the sky depended on the outcome of that test. With the agents leading the way, Ethan stepped inside the manor he'd soon call home. The ground floor comprised a cozy living room, a compact but well-equipped kitchen, and a study where he could pore over strategy and training manuals. Upstairs, a vast master bedroom opened into a generous lounge, its high windows overlooking the garden where he could set up practice drills. Ethan walked from room to room, picturing his elves running drills on the lawn below. If he could steady their progress here, give them time to adapt to their new powers, he'd be ready when the battle lines were finally drawn. And when that day came, both his elves and the rocket would need to be at the very peak of their abilities. For now, though, this quiet suburban retreat would be the crucible in which they refined their strength and prepared for the challenges ahead. Ethan stood on the upper floor and took it all in. With only 2 rooms on this level, the space felt almost cavernous. Downstairs, the layout was just as generous. A grand dining hall, a sleek, restaurant-quality kitchen, a cozy guest bedroom, and a modest living room tucked in one corner. Outside, the estate sprawled across nearly 50,000 square meters. A low wrought iron fence ran around the perimeter, but beyond it lay nothing but dense forest, and no visible road to signal a driveway. To any passerby, it would be easy to assume this place didn't exist. The isolation had its drawbacks. When wild elves drifted out of the trees, they sometimes wandered onto the grounds and caused mischief. Tired of chasing them off, the previous owner eventually decided to sell. The real estate agent brokered a comper, omis. Instead of purchasing, Ethan would rent the manor for a single month. It was enough to call this hidden retreat home for a while. Scattered fruit trees dotted the lawns, though the grass was patchy and overgrown in spots from months of neglect. But Ethan, who'd grown up camping in the wilderness, saw no problem. In fact, his jaw almost hit the ground when he discovered the property's best secret, a massive, crystal-clear swimming pool tucked behind the main building. Ethan smiled. Between this pool and the untouched woods, he'd find plenty of adventure, right in his own backyard. Ethan stood at the edge of the swimming pool, eyeing the water's murky tint. It hadn't been changed in who knows how long, but the broker had been adamant. The filtration system was perfectly sound. If you really want fresh water, just drain it yourself, the agent shrugged. Ethan filed the advice away for later. This house suited him perfectly. He'd originally intended to rent it for just a month, but already he was tempted to stay indefinitely. No neighbors, no prying eyes, complete privacy for the final stretch of his trial. After wiring the broker a single payment of 100,000 Confederation credits, the real estate agent practically vanished, leaving Ethan alone with the empty, silent rooms. It was time to begin his final preparations. With a flick of his will, he summoned the hulking brutes, his so-called dumb beasts, alongside Ghoststone and Damon. His massive milk-processing automaton lumbered behind them. The rest of his elven companions remained secured in their wards until he declared the estate safe. First, Ghoststone swept through every hallway and corner, hunting for hidden cameras or listening devices. Next, Damon scoured the grounds and examined the pool's pipes and filters, ensuring no toxins or traps lay in wait. With both scouts reporting back clean, Ethan led the great milk tank construct into the kitchen. There he set to work preparing dinner for his allies. At last, his sanctuary was secure, and tomorrow he would face the final trial unencumbered. Ethan's milk tank, that hulking, milk-white golem, has unexpectedly become a culinary prodigy. Under his guidance, she's mastered every ingredient and cooking technique known to him. Now, with a single look from Ethan, she knows exactly what he wants to eat. In effect, she's become his personal kitchen assistant. Once Ethan confirmed with the ghost stone and the dim-witted beast that the entire manor and its grounds were secure, he set all the elves free, everyone but the mud golem, who will stay behind to help around the house. He even released the great beaked bird that had been sealed within its elven orb. The estate is far too vast for one person to manage, so it made sense to let every capable hand pitch in. Aside from the main house, where the usual caretakers keep things immaculately dusted, the rest of the manor had fallen into disarray. Overgrown weeds choked the lawns. First, Ethan fitted the Dark Crow with a new load-bearing harness. With 2 elf gardeners at his side, he spent the morning clipping and trimming the grass, bringing it down to a neat, uniform height. It was hard work, but the 2 elves treated it like invigorating exercise. Meanwhile, the dim-witted beast and the young Tyrannosaurus tackled the swimming pool. They drained, scrubbed, and refilled it, pumping crystal-clear water back into the basin until it gleamed in the midday sun. By afternoon, every corner of the estate had been restored to spotless order, just in time for Ethan's next grand culinary experiment. Ethan surveyed the sluggish pool drain with a critical eye. We need this emptied and scrubbed of algae and debris, now. At the edge of the pool, the massive Tyrannosaurus Rex paused, its great tail thudding uncertainly on the deck. With a single steely look from Ethan, the dinosaur straightened, lowered its enormous head, and began carefully scooping water into an improvised chute. Within minutes, the water level dropped enough for Ethan to wade in and start chiseling away stubborn green filth. Next, Ethan turned his attention to the manor's hidden corners. He summoned Ghoststone, the pale wraith of toxic energy. Under Ethan's clear directive, Ghoststone drifted through overgrown hedges and behind crumbling walls, its aura dissolving discarded plastic buckets, tangled garbage bags, and all manner of refuse. The spirit's poison was lethal to waste, but Ethan had been explicit. Nothing could scar the lawns, gardens, or soil. Ghoststone shimmered in agreement, neutralizing every last toxin without so much as a burnt blade of grass. Meanwhile, Ethan prepared his most agile assistant, the scorpion-tailed scorpion. He fastened the creature to the same harness once used by the manor's dark crow patrols. With a few firm tugs, the scorpion scaled the oldest oak in the courtyard and settled on a high branch. There it used its pincers to trim stray limbs, ensuring every tree in the estate received an even, healthy prune. It moved with remarkable balance, never snapping a bough or bruising a leaf, its tail whipping gently to steady itself whenever gusts of wind threatened its perch. Finally, Ethan released the big-billed chick from its cage. The young guardian bird stretched its broad wings and climbed skyward, circling the manor's rooftops and turrets. From this vantage point, it would watch for any wandering elves or unwelcome intruders, calling out at the first sign of danger. For the foreseeable future, the chick would serve as the estate's high-altitude sentry, Ethan's silent, vigilant eyes in the sky. After Ethan finally released the tropical dragon, it stretched out on the manor's grass and immediately drifted into a gentle snore. The creature had already flown 3 days to reach this place, then pushed on for an extra day, and now it was thoroughly exhausted. Though it had promised to come in search of a sumptuous meal, in the end it barely ate a thing, preferring instead to burn off its energy in flight. Chapter 273, Spiritual Training Night, had fully fallen by the time the elves finished their work across the estate. What was once a tangle of unruly grass now lay perfectly trimmed in uniform, the meadow's wild chaos transformed into a broad, even expanse. The swimming pool, too, gleamed under the moonlight, its murky waters entirely cleared. Ethan knelt at the pool's edge and produced several small energy crystals. With practiced ease, he crushed them into a fine powder, then swept it across the water's surface. Almost immediately, the pool began to pulse with a faint, invigorating energy. At that moment, Ethan's young Tyrannosaurus companion let out a delighted roar and lunged into the pool, sending a display of crystal-clear water droplets arcing through the air. Along the perimeter, the enigmatic ghost stone glowed softly. It dissolved every fragment of non-biodegradable waste. Rubber, plastic scraps, even splintered metal, though the process did strain the ground beneath it. Swiftly and silently, the stone absorbed all the released toxins, leaving the soil clean and vital. Not far away, the scorpion-tailed scorpion had been pruning the manor's fruit trees with its sharp pincers. Several branches were neatly clipped, and a number of ripe fruits were conspicuously missing. Ethan only smiled. To him, ordinary fruits, whether wild berries or orchard apples, were no more than casual snacks, easily replaced by the richer harvests he would soon cultivate. Ethan had outdone himself again. With the help of a massive milk tank, he'd prepared an extraordinarily rich feast. Instead of dining indoors, he'd carried a sturdy table out onto the lawn, spreading plates of creamy stew, freshly baked bread, and all manner of dairy-rich dishes across its surface. Even so, a single tropical dragon could easily have eaten him out of house and home, so an outdoor barbecue was essential. He fired up the large grill that came with the house, and with a practiced hand, turned an entire sheep on the spit. If even that weren't enough, he could always fall back on energy blocks, compact, high-calorie supplements designed to sustain magical creatures. Around him sat the elves, digging in with gusto. Ethan himself nibbled sparingly, more interested in observing his guests than in satisfying his appetite. Once the last bits of stew were gone and the coals died down, the elves leaned back, patting their bellies and exchanging contented smiles. It was time to plan. Only 10 days remained before the final trial, and every elf under Ethan's command needed to be fully prepared. Leveling up was one thing, mastering new abilities in the heat of battle was another. He knew that, even with their rising power, if they didn't learn to control their skills, victory would slip through their fingers. Ethan stood, brushing a stray blade of grass from his pants. "Gather around," he said, voice steady. The elves, Dark Crow, Ghost Beast, and Ghost Stone, his earliest and most loyal companions, moved to join him, curiosity shining in their eyes. "These three know what's at stake," Ethan began, seating himself in a folding chair at the head of the table. He looked each elf in the eye. "You understood from the moment you joined me that our mission carried risks. Failure means more than defeat, it means death. Over the next 10 days, we'll finalize our strategy. We'll push your levels higher, yes, but more importantly, you'll learn to wield every power you've gained. Only then can we face the final trial and hope to emerge victorious." A hush fell over the group as Ethan's words sank in. The night air stirred gently, carrying the faint smell of roasting meat and day-old grass. In that moment, the calm before the storm, each elf knew what was expected, and each was ready to do whatever it took. Ethan felt oddly unsettled by the word death. He feared it, and yet, in a strange way, he didn't. The contradiction gnawed at him even now. "Yeah," the beast rumbled in agreement. "Quack," the Dark Crow cawed. "Oh," the Spirit Stone chimed. They journeyed with Han off Trial Island, shared its dangers, and understood what lay ahead. He must return for the final test. Now stronger than ever, they brimmed with confidence, quite a contrast to the worried expressions on the elves' faces. Ethan smiled and held up a hand. "Don't worry," he said. "With our current strength, even if we fall short of victory, we won't be defenseless. At the very least, we can protect ourselves." But as he spoke, a chill ran through him. Even if they failed, as a shadow wielder, his first duty was survival. He hated the thought of placing his life in anyone else's hands. Not because he didn't trust them, but because it reminded him how little control he truly had over his own fate, and he wasn't sure he was strong enough to change that. Even if you possessed Uranus-level power, no, even if you were a near-Uranus-level fighter, you'd still have to retreat before a true Uranus-level master like Ying Opportunity. In the end, it all comes down to strength, or rather, the lack of it. The other elves had never heard of Ethan's past exploits. This was the first time he'd addressed them since claiming their loyalty. He didn't dwell on every detail. Instead, he offered a clear, concise rundown of the dangers that lay ahead, the crises they might face, and exactly what would be needed to get through safely. Having just advanced in rank, the elves were brimming with confidence, but Ethan's words tempered their enthusiasm. Confidence is good, arrogance is not. When he finished speaking, they fell silent, yet their eyes burned with determination and hope. Ethan felt a swell of pride. As their trainer, his role wasn't just to hone their skills, it was to embody them as well. Training elves requires more than drills in spellcraft. It demands forging the very spirit they will carry through life. A trainer's own character becomes the template for each elf, shaping their resolve just as surely as any incantation. Ethan ushered his new charges up to the rooms on the second floor, a warm smile on his face. Over time, they had grown used to sleeping under the same roof, rising with him at dawn, practicing side by side, and confronting every challenge together. Not everyone could fit upstairs, though. The Tyrannosaurus and the tropical dragon were simply too massive for the staircase, so they made camp in the courtyard. The Tyrannosaurus, unfazed by its unconventional lodgings, discovered that the faint energy emanating from the training pool, while not his natural element, was strangely soothing, far more comfortable than the vast ocean. The tropical dragon, meanwhile, was content after a hearty meal and a drink. Ethan, however, had given them a more crucial assignment, guard duty. From now on, they were to patrol the grounds and repel any intruders, human or elf, without hesitation. To secure their loyalty, he promised ample rations as reward for every threat they successfully neutralized. Thus, beneath the glow of the courtyard lanterns, the two colossal beasts settled in for the night, ready to defend their master's domain with tooth and claw. After Ethan secured the tropical dragon's loyalty, the beast soared straight to the rooftop and settled atop the glazed tiles like a sleeping lizard. But the true workhorse turned out to be the awkward-looking, big-billed chick. Known as a flying elf, this creature is famed for its endurance. Farmers often hire them as airborne couriers or mounts. Unfortunately, their homely appearance keeps their market value low, and Ethan had almost sold his off. Then he discovered the chick's real talent. It made a perfect night sentry. Once airborne, it could hover motionless through the darkest hours without tiring, provided its rations held out. No wonder villagers call them sky camels. In light of this, Ethan changed his mind. Rather than releasing or selling the bird, he kept it on watch. With the chick patrolling overhead, Ghoststone no longer needed to stand guard all night. Best of all, feeding the chick required nothing more exotic than ordinary elf rations. Ethan's stores were play, and there was no need to burn through precious energy blocks. The bargain basement bird had become his most reliable guardian. Chapter 274, Battle Ring. The next morning dawned gray and overcast. Ethan led the way to the manor grounds, where the day's training session with the elves was about to begin. He knew that if he wanted the elves to push themselves, he had to train right alongside them. Even if he couldn't match their skill level, showing effort would spur them on. First order of business, conditioning the dark crow. Ethan fastened a new weighted harness to his companion, raising the burden to 60 pounds. Then he commanded the crow to take flight, sending it circling the entire estate. Ethan's benchmark for today was 50 laps. The crow's combat abilities were already well honed, and since its recent level up hadn't unlocked any new techniques, the priority now was physical conditioning and total familiarity with its body. Next, Ethan unveiled a string of enchanted rosary beads he'd specially procured for so-called dumb beasts. These beads functioned as both a power gauge and a training aid, measuring raw supernatural strength while helping the beast hone fine control over its abilities. Among the elves, these creatures rose through the ranks at remarkable speed, but for the dark crow, its formidable inborn power sometimes worked against it. With strength skyrocketing, its precision and control had slipped. Today's drills would be all about balance, endurance in the air, dominance on the ground, and mastery of every ounce of power the dark crow possessed. With Ethan's guidance and the rosary beads to fine-tune its focus, the crow would soon transform raw might into a disciplined, razor-sharp weapon. And when that day came, no one in the battle ring would stand a chance. Ethan watched Ghoststone bustle about the manor courtyard, its iridescent scales flickering in the morning light. He had just fitted the creature with a set of mind beads, crystalline beads enchanted to sharpen focus and keep its energy from flagging between battles. Over the past weeks, Ghoststone's poisonous glands had developed at an almost alarming rate. There seemed to be no ceiling to how potent its venom could become. To push that envelope further, Ethan had purchased a fresh supply of concentrated gas vials, and already he could see the toxin reserves in Ghoststone's belly swelling again. But raw power wasn't enough. Ghoststone had recently learned 2 advanced toxicology skills, corrosive mist and venomous barrage, only to lose control of them in the heat of combat. Today's training would change that. Ethan dug a shallow pit in the gravel courtyard, lining one wall with absorbent rune cloths. He guided Ghoststone through a series of exercises, first releasing minute jets of gas, then drawing it back into recondensing glands. With each cycle, Ghoststone grew steadier, measuring out venom drops with ever greater precision and reabsorbing any surplus before it could dissipate. At the same time, Paula, the crystalline sprite of ice, hovered nearby, her frosty aura pulsing as she practiced conditional spells. Ethan had already taught her the fundamentals of glacial formation and frost weaving, but in the last skirmish, her hailstorms had been too slow to cast and too rigid in pattern. So as Ghoststone refined its toxins, Paula worked on accelerating her incantations and varying her ice shards' trajectories. Under Ethan's watchful eye, the 2 companions trained in tandem, Ghoststone mastering the ebb and flow of its venom, Paula honing split-second timing without sacrificing the devastating chill of her magic. By sundown, both had made remarkable strides, and Ethan knew the next battle would be all the more formidable for it. Ethan had just stocked up on a giant bottle of calcium tablets for his scorpion-tailed companion. The idea was simple. By loading it with calcium during its growth phase, he could push it past its natural size limits. Now, without fail, the creature swallowed 2 tablets 3 times a day. Ethan even rigged his large milk dispenser to issue a reminder when it was time for each dose. Only yesterday they'd reached Zijing City, and Ethan had wasted no time heading straight for the black market's skill learner. There, he installed 2 advanced abilities. He taught his so-called dumb beast the jet flame technique and Lala the frozen light skill. In theory, both could learn either move, but these were complex high-level techniques, far from trivial to master on short notice. Faced with that reality, Ethan made a tactical choice. His team desperately needed firepower, so the dumb beast got jet flame. Although it was a water element elf by nature, better suited to aquatic spells and super abilities, it could still learn fire magic. It would be a tougher journey than honing its own element, but Ethan knew bolstering his team's offensive versatility was worth the extra effort. Ethan's second requirement for the mindless beasts was that they master flame breathing within 10 days. Among all his creatures, Paula's natural affinity for ice magic was the strongest, so the frostlight technique became her focus. Over the next week, her sole task was to hone that skill until it flowed effortlessly. Aside from 2 tool elves and the auxiliary milk elves, Ethan assigned clear, individual goals to each member of his group. After his stern reminder the previous night, no one dared to slack off. Every morning, they rose eager to meet the targets he had set. Ethan's strategy was straightforward. Use these 10 days to push their abilities to the limit, then head to the Zijing City battlefield, secure real combat experience, and make one final sprint toward readiness. 7 days of relentless training passed. Although exhaustion crept into every muscle, not a single elf eased up. On the morning of the 8th day, Ethan gathered them for assessment. Confident that they had fully mastered their bodies and spells, he called an end to the regimen. By then, each elf had risen in level, and their combat effectiveness finally met Ethan's exacting standards. Over the past week, our elves haven't gained any new levels, but their combat performance has improved dramatically. If we now pit our 4 elven units, the Dark Elves, the Dull Beasts, the Ghost Stones, and the Slings, against a tropical dragon, they won't need 3 tries to prevail. Even if they stumble on the first or second pass, by the 3rd engagement, they can wear the dragon down and force a decisive victory. In short, rank alone isn't the key to real progress. It's the harmony of body, skill, and teamwork that matters most. Early this morning after breakfast with Ethan, I made my way to the battle ring in Zijing City. This arena is one of the city's most renowned attractions, drawing both curious citizens and seasoned veterans at all hours. Battles are in session 24 hours a day. The complex houses 8 individual arenas. For a fee of 10,000 Union coins, any trainer may enter their elf into the ring, and if their combatant triumphs, there are additional rewards waiting in the prize hall. Today, I plan to put our newly honed team synergy to the test and show just how far they've come. The platform's payout is entirely tied to your streak of consecutive wins. Here's how it works. 1. Win your first match and you immediately earn 20,000 Union coins. 2. After that, you have 2 choices: cash out and leave with your coins, or stay on as defender to keep your streak alive. 3. Win a second match and you add 40,000 more to your pool. Your total is now 60,000. A third straight victory nets another 60,000, and so on. 4. By the time you reach 10 consecutive wins, your accumulated bonus will total 1.1 million Union coins. At that point, you can withdraw the entire sum whether you decide to continue battling or not. 5. Be warned, however, if you lose at any stage before that 10th win, you forfeit the entire bonus pool. 6. Finally, completing a 10-win streak automatically promotes you to the next platform tier. There are 8 tiers in all, each offering higher base rewards than the last. In short, the longer your winning streak, the larger your payout. And if you can string together 10 victories in a row, you'll not only pocket over 1 million Union coins, but also advance to the next level of competition. Ethan stared at the glowing panel in front of him, absorbing the reward schedule for the upcoming tournament. For the first tier platform, the base reward is 20,000 Union coins. Each time you win, that reward increases by another 20,000, so your first victory earns you 20,000, the next nets 40,000, then 60,000, and so on. On the second tier, the base starts at 30,000, which means 30,000 for your first win, 60,000 for your second, 90,000 for your third, etc. Every higher tier follows the same escalating pattern. He tapped a few more buttons, watching as the figures climbed with each hypothetical win streak. This system really rewards consistency, he said, a hint of a grin tugging at his lips. Clearing these tiers would get him closer than ever to erasing those lingering debts. Author's note: we're almost finished with our debt payoff arc. Thank you all for sticking with me. Your monthly tickets, recommendation votes, subscriptions, and fan requests have meant the world. Let's keep this momentum going to the very end. Chapter 275, Qing Yuan. Ethan stood at the edge of the grand arena in Zijing City, watching hundreds of trainers mill about. Word had spread like wildfire. This place's reward system was unparalleled in the entire Elven realm. Generous payouts, rare artifacts, exalted titles. Anyone who climbed its ranks walked away immensely richer and infinitely more respected. Conversation buzzed all around him. Trainers compared notes on how they'd just broken into the first stage of the ring, or how many consecutive victories it had taken them. Elsewhere, such bragging might seem hollow, but here in Zijing City, clearing stage 1 was a badge of honor. I only needed 6 duels, one competitor claimed. 8 straight wins for me, another countered. The air crackled with pride and rivalry. Ethan couldn't help but think back to Earth's online games, where players had to string together 8 victories just to move up a tier, a system almost identical to the ring's point structure. 8 battles, no losses. That was the threshold for first-stage glory on both worlds. Not every face in the crowd represented a sanctioned league trainer. Underworld operatives and secretive organizations sent their best fighters to test the ring's limits and maybe break some rules in the process. Officially, the Alliance declared a victor once an elf lost the ability to continue fighting. Unofficially, though, some matches ended with elves slain outright. After all, elven skills weren't limitless. When their reserves ran dry, grievous wounds and even death became all too common. Ethan inhaled deeply. The stakes here were higher than any battlefield he'd known. Every bout carried the promise of untold reward and the risk of unspeakable loss. He adjusted the straps on his satchel, recalling the oath he'd sworn before crossing into this world, to fight honorably, protect his bond elf at any cost, and above all, survive the trials that lay ahead. With that resolve hardening in his chest, he stepped forward into the throng, ready for his own turn in the ring. Ethan leaned back in his seat, eyes fixed on the glowing arena before him. To many viewers, the raw brutality of these fights was perversely thrilling, a favorite way to unwind after a long day. The platform's organizers made their real money not just from fighter entry fees, but from ticket sales. Early round bouts were simple affairs, cheap tickets, a steady stream of fights. But once you reached the higher tiers, the action became spectacular, and ticket prices soared accordingly. He'd heard that 7th and 8th rank matches barely happened, maybe once a year at best. Even so, when such a fight was finally announced, it sold out instantly, despite costs far beyond what an ordinary fan could afford. That kind of demand spoke volumes about how profitable this operation had become. Ethan didn't know exactly who was behind the arena, certainly not the official league, nor the Rockets gang. If it were an alliance or syndicate, he reasoned, they'd build their headquarters in a major hub like Kanto or Chengdu. The Fengyuan region simply lacked the stability and resources to support something on this scale. Its underworld was too fractured. Whoever ran this show preferred to stay off the usual maps, and Ethan suspected that anonymity was their greatest weapon. Ethan stared at the newly erected platform, puzzling over its purpose. If the Rockets could build a structure like this here, what else might they be planning? And in which other regions could they deploy it? With a network of these platforms, they could encircle and wipe out every underground faction in the Fengyuan area. Clearly, this wasn't the doing of the League or the Rockets. Whatever group was behind it, whether a single unknown force or a coalition, Ethan didn't know them, and for now, it didn't matter. Right now, he had a different objective, giving his elves some real combat experience. Since this tournament wasn't sanctioned by the League, registration didn't require real names. Most trainers competed under aliases, and Ethan was thrilled by the freedom it offered. Each of his identities came with a distinct roster of genies. If he wanted to unleash every genie in a single day's worth of matches, one account simply wouldn't suffice. He walked into the cavernous battle arena and felt the crowd's energy surge around him. This was a first-tier platform, the most popular and fiercely contested of them all. Thousands of spectators filled the stands, and an even greater number of competitors roamed the sidelines, each waiting for their name to be called. Ethan allowed himself a small grin. Here, on this bustling stage, his elves would finally see the kind of action he'd promised them, and he would have every trick in the book at his disposal. A gambling table had been set up beside the arena by the event organizers. Every match offered its own odds, which guaranteed the house would never lose. Winners simply took money from losers, and vice versa. Ethan bought a spectator's ticket first, then spent some time watching the fighters on the first ring's platforms. He hadn't intended to fight in the opening matches. He knew he stood no chance yet. But he wanted to size up the contestants before deciding which elf to field. What he observed confirmed the rumors. Most of the combat sprites clustered between levels 20 and 25. Only a handful fell below level 20, and even fewer had pushed past level 25. Those under 20 usually couldn't last a full bout, while any stronger than 25 had probably already moved up to the second ring. Satisfied he understood the field, Ethan approached the registration desk. A staff member handed him a form. He filled in his details and on impulse chose Ethan as his fighting name. With that, he was officially entered and ready for whatever came next. Ethan's memory of his upcoming opponent was hazy, just some green-clad figure he'd seen somewhere in the past. He couldn't place the face or the name, and really, he didn't care to. He'd arrived early, so there'd been no need to linger in the entry queue. Now he simply sat in the competitor's waiting room and waited. Around him, dozens of others jockeyed for attention in flamboyant masks, exotic costumes, or glowing accessories, anything to catch a scout's eye. In comparison, Ethan's plain black robe was almost invisible. A giant screen on the far wall showed the arena in real time, competitors clashing in bursts of light and power. No spectator in the waiting room spoke. The only sound was the murmur of the broadcast. Please prepare, young athletes. The next match is about to begin. Competitor number 22, it's your turn. The announcement repeated twice more before the line in front of Ethan stirred. Standing up, he smoothed the folds of his robe and walked confidently to the betting official's table. He produced his World War I bank card, an outdated relic, but still accepted in this circuit, and tapped it against the reader. With a soft beep, he loaded every last coin from his balance, 150,000 Union coins. The official punched a few keys, then slid a small holo display across the table. Ethan glanced down at the figures, 3-to-1 odds. Satisfied, he nodded once, locked eyes with the official, and stepped back into the line. His match would begin any second. Ethan studied the odds flashing on the big screen. His opponent had just rattled off 3 straight victories, while Ethan himself was still an untested rookie. To the organizers, his chances looked slim, well under 30%. They'd set the maximum wager at 200,000 credits for this opening bout, and Ethan's own bet of 150,000 was already pushing that limit. The clerks at the betting counter shot each other surprised glances as they keyed in his information. These caps existed for a reason, to prevent fighters from colluding, throwing matches, and then cleaning up at the book. No one wanted to see the house go under, and the moment someone tried a fixed fight, the regulators would swoop in and shut everything down. In all the years this arena had operated, no phony match had ever gone unpunished. With his bet locked in, Ethan stepped out of the waiting room, determination set in his jaw. 3-to-1 odds. If he could pull off an upset, he stood to win tens of millions. This platform wasn't some casual online service. It was a full-scale arena, ringed on all sides by tiered seating and buzzing with anticipation. And now, it was time for him to prove he belonged. Ethan stepped into the arena and surveyed the battlefield. The only playable ground was the sunken pit in the center, a shallow depression carved straight into hard stone. For the sake of simplicity, the organizers had declared the entire field a rock terrain, no matter which Pokémon each trainer chose. If someone showed up with a water type, they could only pray for mercy. Author's note: I accidentally used my brother's name in this chapter. Sorry about that, big bro. Chingye also asked me to remind you to grab a monthly pass if you want early access to new chapters. Don't forget to stock up on tickets and hit that subscribe button. Chapter 276, The Boy in the Hat. Our next contender, Heaven's King, has decided to press on. He's already banked 120,000 Union coins. Win this bout, and that total will leap to 200,000. Uranus fans, will he keep his streak alive? Stay tuned. The flamboyant host stood center stage, voice booming as he hyped the ever-growing prize pool. Extravagant jackpots like this didn't just fire up the fighters, they electrified the audience and lured even more challengers to Taiwan's grand tournament. King, 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 the crowd chanted in a single, thunderous wave. From beneath his hip-hop style mask, Heaven's King spread his arms wide, soaking in the cheers. He loved every second of the spotlight. At the edge of the stage, Ethan adjusted his cap, biting back a chuckle. He'd been ready to mock the grandiose title. Heaven's King? Even bigger than the so-called Heavenly Kings? But the roar of the spectators gave him pause. Such inflated names didn't usually carry real power. Yet, he straightened his shoulders and stepped forward, determination flickering in his eyes. If this was the stage, then let's see just how far he could go. When Ethan's name echoed through the arena, a wave of boos swept the stands. Yaching-ching? The host had announced it like a grand title, but the name sounded more like a pheasant than a fearsome monarch of Qingyu. A challenger with a name this delicate hardly seemed destined to unseat a 3-time champion. Ethan drew his dark hood over his head and stepped onto the edge of the battlefield. The host's voice boomed once more. Can our reigning big heavenly king extend his winning streak to 4? Or will this untried youth rise to claim the throne? Ladies and gentlemen, let the contest begin. With a theatrical bow, the announcer retreated and the referee took center stage. Rules are simple, he declared. Each trainer may deploy 2 elves. If the trainer is defeated or both elves lose their combat capability, the match is over. Prepare yourselves. Fight! At his command, both competitors drew forth their elven orbs and launched them into the sand. Ethan's first elf materialized in a swirl of dark mist. A claw-tailed scorpion, sleek and menacing. The second the creature hit the ground, it flicked its pincers and flexed its limbs, testing its strength. The scorpion struck first. Sidestepping with startling speed, it lunged forward, pincers snapping together before coiling its barbed tail in a lethal arc. The crowd fell silent at the display of precision and power, a reminder that even the humblest name can hide a formidable warrior. Ethan watched as his opponent's great king sent a new challenger onto the field, a small childlike elf wearing a broad lotus-shaped hat. Without a second thought, Ethan brought his scanner chip to bear, reading the creature's data in an instant. Dark yellow tier, rank 22. Type, water grass. Specialty, exceptional mobility. Vulnerabilities, doubly weak to insect, flying, and poison. Perfect. Ethan's own partner, scorpion-tailed scorpion, was a dual insect poison djinn, engineered precisely to exploit those weaknesses. Clearly, the great king hadn't recognized the danger. He stood there, mask unmoved, still brimming with confidence. Under the blazing sun, Lotus Hat's rain-boosting ability would be all but useless. Ethan pulled his hood low, voice low and gravelly. Scorpion-tailed scorpion, use agility, full speed. For the first time in a one-on-one duel, his scorpion-tailed scorpion scuttled forward, pincers raised, ready to turn Lotus Hat's greatest strengths into liabilities. Ethan watched as the scorpion-tailed creature sprang into action. With a flick of its pincers, it skittered over the rocky ground, sending a small cloud of dust swirling into the air. "Lotus Hat Squad, sound the call!" barked the chief, his eyes widening in surprise at the creature's speed. A chorus of quacking, duck-like cries echoed from the ranks of the young warriors, the so-called Lotus Hat Squad, but the signal fell flat. The scorpion-tailed scout paid them no mind. "Poison tail, Stee, nang on my command," Ethan called out calmly. The scout's tail arched behind it, the venomous tip glinting in the sun. Ethan wasn't the least bit surprised that the distraction failed. If the creature shrugged off simple summons, all the better to test its real combat prowess. In the scout's dark, multifaceted eyes shone pure excitement. The past weeks of grueling drills, physical conditioning, weapon work, tactical maneuvers had been an ordeal. Ethan had pushed each recruit to their limits, and among all his elven charges, the scorpion-tailed scout was often overlooked as one of the weakest. During previous skirmishes, its larger comrades had carried it through battle. But now, facing this unfamiliar enemy, the little scout finally had its chance to prove itself. Its tail cracked like a whip, and the battle was joined. Ethan cued his scorpion-tailed scorpion into another blistering burst of speed. The creature's massive bulk seemed to vanish as it hurtled forward, lightning fast. The boy in the lotus hat froze, eyes wide with terror, but before he could even cry out, the scorpion was on him. A murderous gleam flared in its multifaceted eyes, and a pale, worm-like green energy seeped between its jagged pincers, the residue of countless training bites on the manor's trees. With a savage snap, the scorpion clamped down on the boy's arm. He howled, pain lancing up his shoulder. There was no respite. In the same heartbeat, the scorpion's barbed tail whipped over its back, the stinger crackling with veins of purple poison. It slammed into the boy's other side. Though the venom hadn't been refined like ghoststone toxin, it was still true scorpion poison, far from harmless. Excruciating pain bloomed where the stinger struck, and the boy's scream echoed across the courtyard. Ethan watched coolly, arms folded, as the scorpion held its relentless grip. He knew this demonstration would leave its mark, not just on the boy, but on anyone who dared doubt his control over the deadly creature. Ethan watched as the scorpion-tailed scorpion sprang back, leaving the lotus-hatted boy slumped on the sand. He nodded to himself. Rule 1 of combat, he'd taught it well. After you strike, never give chase. Hold your ground and be ready for your opponent's counterattack. But there would be no counterattack today. The boy in the lotus hat lay still. A clear announcement rang out over the arena's speakers. The lotus-hatted boy has been incapacitated. His second elf, Your Majesty. From the royal dais, the great celestial king, his face hidden behind a lacquered mask, wiped sweat from his brow. Losing so decisively had clearly rattled him. Ethan felt no sympathy. If even the scorpion-tailed scorpion couldn't finish off such an opponent, then what had it been training for all this time? In every respect, qualifications, endurance, combat technique, elemental affinity, the two elves were perfectly matched. This sort of battle should have been a clash of equals, a true test of skill and will. Instead, it had ended in a single, crushing blow. Ethan turned his attention to the stands, where the assembled spectators were already chanting. Their voices rose in unison, shouting, "Qingye! Qingye!" A reminder that crowds always rallied behind whoever seemed strongest. Today, that applause belonged to the boy in the lotus hat. But for Ethan and his scorpion-tailed companion, there was only one outcome that mattered: victory. And they had achieved it without breaking a sweat. Before the Heavenly King could taste victory, his supporters erupted in cheers, though their shouts weren't for him, but for the challenger. Everyone had just witnessed Ethan's scorpion-tailed scorpion obliterate the king's prized lotus hat child in a single, devastating exchange. The arena hummed with excitement as onlookers marveled at the green cricket newcomer's power. Gritting his teeth, the Heavenly King withdrew his shattered lotus hat child back into its Pokeball. He was no fool. Arrogance had its limits. He knew he couldn't hold out much longer, and the prize money was already slipping through his fingers. Calmly, he unbuckled another Pokeball from his belt and sent it skittering across the battlefield. With a metallic click, the second ball sprang open, releasing a level 21 stinky flower. Its drooping head and fetid pollen gave off a pungent stench, an odd contrast to the graceful lotus hat child that had just fallen. In raw combat ability, and especially against Ethan's merciless scorpion-tailed scorpion, the stinky flower stood little chance. The crowd held its breath. Would this last gambit turn the tide, or was the Heavenly King's defeat already written in stone? Chapter 277. Sniper Ethan stood at the edge of the rocky arena, calm despite the charged atmosphere. He wasn't eager for a fight. He sensed no hostility from his opponent. But that didn't deter his companion, the claw-tailed scorpion. Claw-tailed scorpion, use high-velocity roll, then strike with a precision pincer attack. Remember the sniper tactics I taught you, Ethan commanded. The scorpion's tail twitched, coils of muscle tensing beneath its segmented armor. With astonishing speed, it spun up a cloud of dust and lunged across the stones toward the hulking stink blossom. Before the plant could react, the scorpion's pincers snapped into the blossom's soft ribs with deadly accuracy. In that instant, its sniper ability activated, amplifying the blow by 2.25 times. The impact was decisive. The stink blossom convulsed once, its vines going limp as it collapsed to the ground, utterly incapacitated. "Stink blossom is out!" "Victory goes to Ethan and the claw-tailed scorpion," the referee announced, raising his flag high. "Champion, you may issue the next challenge." A thunderous roar erupted from the stands. The silent arena exploded with cheers as fans stamped their feet and shouted in unison, "Qingye! Qingye!" By now, the lost King of Heaven had long since faded into the background, its shape receding toward the far edge of the arena. The claw-tailed scorpion scampered back to Ethan's side, its pincers clicking in excitement. Ethan crouched beside it, gently stroking the creature's armored back before producing a high-grade energy core from his belt pouch. Although the fight hadn't emptied the scorpion's reserves entirely, it clearly needed a boost. After a few moments of feeding, its amber eyes gleamed with renewed vigor. "Good work, Scout," Ethan murmured, patting the scorpion's segmented tail. "Remember how that felt. Before you strike, watch your opponent's movements closely, find the openings in their defense. Then launch in with everything you've got and aim to end the fight in one decisive blow. Once you've knocked them down, fall back immediately. Stay alert for your next chance." He paused to let the advice sink in, then added with a grin, "This training isn't just about making money or leveling up. It's about sharpening your instincts in real combat. But hey, if we earn some extra credits along the way, that won't hurt either." Standing, Ethan gave the scorpion a final encouraging nod. As the creature's claws lifted in readiness, he knew their next match would be a true test of everything they'd learned. Ethan's share of the battle prize pool was 20,000 Union coins, but that was just the base payout. Because he'd staked 150,000 Union coins of his own, winning would trigger a triple bonus and push his total haul to a potential 450,000 Union coins. Just then, the host strode onto the arena floor. "Ha ha ha, everyone! Let's congratulate our newest champion. He's banked 20,000 Union coins so far. If he dares to challenge again, the next match will be worth 40,000 Union coins." A roar swept through the crowd. 20,000 Union coins might be pocket change for Ethan, but for many spectators, it equaled a month or even 2 of income. Their voices rose in eager encouragement. Go on, keep fighting, let that pot grow, and then see him lose it all in one dramatic collapse. They lived for the spectacle of a player's crushing regret, for that instant when a massive prize slipped through desperate fingers. Come on, they chanted. Keep challenging. The host's voice boomed through the stadium microphone. Green player, he called, gesturing dramatically. Will you end the match now and claim your bonus, or press on for a chance at even greater rewards? A thunderous chorus rose from the stands. Keep going. Carry on. Continue. Ethan didn't flinch. Prize money meant nothing compared to training his elves, and this was only the first round. There was no way he was giving up now. The host smiled and announced, the green player chooses to continue. Please welcome our next challenger, Afe. From the entrance G8, a young man appeared, wearing no armor or disguise. He walked onto the field with steady confidence, openly declaring who he was. Yet the match held no real suspense. Ethan released his claw-tailed scorpion, and in a matter of moments, the creature had landed 2 precise strikes, another quick double victory. The audience erupted in cheers as the scorpion's pincers clicked shut on its defeated opponent. In this battle, the first time the claw-tailed scorpion struck out at his opponent, he was so sure of a one-shot kill that he aimed straight for the vitals. But his shot went wide, his sniper trait never activated, and he failed to dodge the counterattack in time. The enemy's blow landed squarely. Although the damage was minor, Ethan wasted no time reprimanding him. Reckless gambits like that were never part of his strategy. Ethan understood the scorpion's raw power, how he could fell an enemy in seconds when he chose to, but he also knew the scorpion still couldn't reliably identify an opponent's weak points. So Ethan's rule was simple: strike hard, then retreat immediately. Whether the target fell or stayed on its feet, the scorpion was to pull back at once, unless Ethan gave a direct order to press the assault. Chastened by Ethan's rebuke, the claw-tailed scorpion realized how his string of easy victories had inflated his pride. Yet this mistake proved to be a blessing in disguise. Ethan now had the perfect teaching moment. Better to learn this lesson here than to pay for it in the final trial. Ethan had spent weeks drilling his elves in team tactics, but until now, he'd never tested them in true one-on-one duels. That was the whole point of entering the Alliance battle format, to expose each elf's individual weaknesses and correct them on the spot. In the previous round, Ethan had called out his Scorptail Scorpion's arrogance, and the reprimand worked wonders. From then on, the Scorpion approached every match with laser focus. It still vibrated with raw excitement, but its contemptuous swagger was gone. Now, whenever Ethan withheld his command, the Scorpion would instinctively hold back rather than overextend and leave itself open. That disciplined approach paid off immediately. Round after round, Ethan's tactical calls and the Scorptail Scorpion's restrained ferocity dismantled one opponent after another. With each victory, his share of the prize fund grew, and so did the arena's excitement. By his 9th straight win, the crowd was on its feet, roaring, "Ethan! Ethan! Ethan!" A 10-match winning streak was still a rarity, even in this seasoned field, and everyone knew they were on the brink of witnessing history. Many of the spectators had never witnessed a 10-match winning streak before. Most players choose to pause once they've reached a certain level, saving their progress and coming back another day. But Ethan pressed on without a break, using nothing more than his lone elven class build to defeat 9 consecutive opponents. It was electrifying. No wonder the arena erupted in cheers and disbelief. Today was a performance no one there would ever forget. Encore, encore, season passes, more tickets. Subscribe now. Chapter 278, 9 wins and counting. Let's hear it for this young competitor. The announcer's voice thundered through the arena, veins bulging at his neck as he gripped the microphone. He's racked up an impressive 900,000 Union coins in his personal prize pool. One more victory, and he'll snag an extra 200,000, pushing his total to a jaw-dropping 1.1 million. Ethan, Ethan, the crowd roared back, the name echoing off the rafters. To most in the stands, 1.1 million Union coins was an unfathomable fortune, something they might never earn in a lifetime. Yet here was Ethan, on the cusp of making it his. The 900,000 coin milestone was already secured, but that figured scarcely in anyone's mind now. What everyone craved was the perfect 10-match streak, and the colossal bonus attached to it. Electric anticipation crackled through the audience. Every eye was fixed on the arena floor, awaiting Ethan's next move. Still, buried beneath their cheers was a curious undercurrent. Part of them wanted Ethan to falter. If he slipped up, that bonus wouldn't go to him, or anyone. They'd rather see the jackpot vanish than hand it over to another. But for now, they had no choice but to watch. 9 wins down, 1 to go. The question on everyone's lips, could Ethan make history? In the spacious VIP lounge behind the grand tournament arena, a small circle of well-dressed men lounged on deep leather sofas, each nursing a glass of aged red wine. Through the wide observation window, they could see the floodlit stadium pulsing with cheers every time Ethan made a move in the ring. Someone broke the silence. That kid's lucky streak is turning heads. You thinking what I'm thinking? Want to put him to the test? Test him how? Another scoffed. I haven't even seen his scorpion tail scorpion card played from start to finish. He's got an entire lineup of elves at his disposal. This one's probably the weakest in his deck. A third tapped his glass against the table. Precisely why we can't just let him walk away with a 1.1 million credit bonus unchecked. Even with our cut, we'll come out way down if he keeps sweeping opponents. Then do something about it, the first voice shot back. Send someone in who can actually beat him. The room fell into a low murmur. Where do we find that caliber of player on such short notice? And even if we do, won't the winner just be the next target in his 10-match win streak? This kid's got momentum. Once he hits double digits, the house cut's going to tank. All eyes turned to the man in the high-backed chair at the head of the table. He swirled the ruby wine in his glass so deliberately it caught the low lounge light. No one spoke. They waited, every heartbeat echoing through the tense hush for him to decide their next move. Ethan felt every pair of eyes in the room settle on him. He raised his glass to his nose, inhaled the wine's rich aroma, and let a small, contemplative sip linger on his tongue. A faint smile curved his lips. Whether it came from the wine's warmth or a sudden idea, he wasn't sure. Why don't we field someone else who's already on an 8 or 9 game winning streak? He suggested smoothly. One of today's registrants, the elf competitor, remember? Almost notched 9 straight wins last season. Only his 10th match was delayed because of his elven status. At Ethan's words, the assembled managers exchanged excited glances. If a player could claim 10 consecutive victories, the tournament's special bonus would be triggered, and everyone stood to profit. Splitting that reward between 2 champions was hardly a burden. They all knew the unspoken rules. The sponsors and match officials could guide the competition, but they couldn't overtly rig it. If every time a contender neared a big payout they quietly lost, fans would catch on, and the prize pool would shrink. Interest and ticket sales would slump. A few strategic matchups here and there kept the games credible, and the profits rolling in. With a confident nod, Ethan set his glass down. The plan was in motion. Bring in the elf, let him run the gauntlet, and watch the bonus and the spectacle grow. Behind the scenes, powerful backers ensure that no one ever drops out of the circuit. They bankroll the entire enterprise, quietly tweaking a chip here or there to skim a little extra profit. Everyone knows it's shady. Who in their right mind would compete otherwise? These organizers can't afford major blunders. They're in it for the long game. Their goal isn't to bankroll a single big winner, but to turn a reliable, steady profit. After each small adjustment, the controllers at headquarters simply chuckle into the phone and return their attention to the match unfolding live. Who wins or loses hardly matters to them. They just manage the machinery. If their favored side triumphs, they collect a little bonus. If not, well, it's all part of the operation. Exactly how deep their influence runs remains a mystery. Back on the arena floor, the announcer, just patched in through his earpiece, grinned broadly as he faced the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, he boomed, breaking news. Ethan's next opponent is also riding a 9-match winning streak. So here's the question on everyone's lips. Will Ethan seize his 10th consecutive victory and cement his dominance? Or can this challenger pull off the upset and notch their own 10 victories in a row? The answer's coming up next. Stay with us. The roar of the crowd echoed through the arena as the announcer's voice cut across the noise. On one side, Bamboo Shoot, and on the other, Waiting for Work. Which of them will be the dark horse tonight? Let's find out. A moment of tense silence, then the stadium erupted once more. Welcome our second 9-win qualifier. Tank! Chingye! Chingye! Tank! Tank! Two 9-win champions standing opposite each other. Popularity on both sides was sky high. This wasn't just any match. The victor would take home a staggering $1.1 million and secure a coveted spot in the next round. Even seasoned fans, no strangers to 10-game winning streaks, felt their hearts pound faster. Never before had two 9-win legends collided on this stage. Adrenaline surged through the audience, and shouts of Tank and Chingye blended into a single thunderous wave. Behind the scenes, the Yantai tournament organizers were scrambling to open up the betting windows. Earlier in the competition, when Ethan had been crushed so decisively, the outcome had been a foregone conclusion. Odds had been skewed, and bettors had barely broken even. Tonight was different. With two perfect records on the line, the suspense was back, and so were the high-stakes bets. Ethan hadn't even had a chance to rest, and his opponent, known simply as Tank, was already pacing for the match. When the betting odds appeared on the board, Ethan edged out as the slight favorite at 1.5 to 1. It was a clear sign that the organizers were counting on Tank's name recognition. One by one, the crowd placed their wagers, injecting real suspense into the showdown. Of course, regardless of who wins the bout, the house always comes out ahead. Unfazed, Ethan beckoned a staff member over, pulled the $450,000 he'd just won from his pocket, and set aside $200,000 to bet on his own victory. The payout was slim, but even at 1.5 to 1, it guaranteed him a modest profit. With the announcer's final flourish still echoing through the arena, the moment everyone had been waiting for had arrived. The match was about to begin. Chapter 279, Nose Pass. Ethan's eyes tracked the other trainer as he stepped onto the stadium's sandy floor, a towering man known only as Tank. Muscles rippled across his bare torso, and he wore a leather hood that concealed everything but his eyes and mouth. With his imposing build and masked face, he looked less like a sportsman and more like someone who might rob a bank on a whim. Ethan knew Tank had done his homework. He must have studied the files on Ethan's first two Pokémon, the armored claw-tailed scorpions. Now the bell rang to signal the start of the third and decisive round. Without hesitation, Tank snatched a Pokeball from his belt and hurled it at the center of the arena. A brilliant glow pulsed, and standing before them was Nose Pass, its pale green, rocky body pointing resolutely north, as its name implied. The referee quickly called out its data. Pokémon, Nose Pass, gender, male, level 26, type rock, nature, sturdy, held item none, innate moves, tackle, harden, rock throw, block, pound, rock slide, TMHM moves, thunder punch, shockwave, power gem, other techniques, rollout, stealth, rock terrain, sleep talk. Ethan's heart quickened. Nose Pass was the very embodiment of a physical wall. Nearly half of its stat total was dedicated to defense, and its rock-solid endurance made it notoriously hard to crack. Facing down one of the toughest defensive Pokémon in the region would be a brutal challenge, especially after Ethan's Scorpions had already taken such heavy hits. He raised his Pokeball in response. Scorpio, get ready. We've got to outsmart this guy. Stay mobile and hit Nose Pass from all sides. As the sun blazed overhead and the crowd roared around them, Ethan and Tank prepared for a battle of strategy and willpower. In this arena, only one trainer would walk away victorious. Ethan stood at the edge of the sandy Ring 1 arena, his heart pounding. Across from him, the crowd fell silent as the rival trainer Tank tossed out his Pokémon with a confident smirk. A massive gray figure lumbered into view. Nose Pass, the north-facing, rock type, renowned throughout the Fengyuan region for its unwavering gaze and stubborn defense. At level 26, this Nose Pass was a rare sight in the early rounds, and Tank already boasted 9 consecutive victories. Ethan gave his claw-tailed scorpion a sharp whistle. The insectoid creature skittered forward, pincers raised and tail coiled to strike. But the moment Skorupi's stinger flexed, the commentators leapt in with type analysis. Remember, rock types resist normal, flying, poison, and fire moves. so your typical poison sting and claw swipes will only deal half damage to Nosepass. Bug-type attacks are neutral, yes, but against Nosepass's colossal physical defense, they might barely scratch it. They continued. On the flip side, Nosepass is vulnerable to ground, steel, water, and grass attacks. Any one of those would land super effective hits. Unfortunately for Ethan, his Scorpion doesn't know any of those moves. A ripple of surprise ran through the stands. Even inexperienced trainers in the audience knew the implications. Ethan's only advantage was speed and unpredictability. Ethan met Tank's gaze, determination flashing in his eyes. Charging fanfare boomed over the speakers as Skorupi lunged forward, pincers clicking. Dust swirled around the two combatants. It was strength and defense against agility and guile, and in that charged silence, the battle had truly begun. Ethan had started feeding his claw-tailed Scorpion the high-energy calcium tablets he'd just bought, and although it hadn't been long, the results were already striking. In the Shenao region, a fully grown elven claw-tailed Scorpion tops out at around 80 centimeters. His Scorpion had reached that height and then stalled, its skeletal development not yet locked in but unable to progress without external support. So Ethan set up a simple regimen, 3 calcium pills a day. After just 1 week, his Scorpion shot up to 90 centimeters, 10 nanometers taller than the regional standard. Because claw-tailed Scorpions are so rare in Shenao, most people in the arena had only a vague idea of their anatomy and would be startled by its sheer size. Remarkably, the extra mass hadn't cost it any speed or agility. Ethan watched his Scorpion flex its claws and thought, this time, its opponent will have to be ready. Ethan stood at the edge of the combat ring, his black robe swirling in the afternoon breeze. Beneath its folds, his fingers closed around a small remote control, the lifeline of his scorpion-tailed automaton. He pressed a single button. Release the ballast, he whispered. Inside the machine, heavy counterweights disengaged with a soft clank. Instantly, the scorpion automaton seemed to inhale freedom. Its segmented body quivered, claws flexing with renewed vigor, and it emitted a delighted metallic shriek. Ethan remembered Dark Raven's words, that shedding ballast would feel like casting off 1,000 chains, but he hadn't believed it until now. The automaton's movements felt almost buoyant, as though it could leap skyward at any moment. A shrill blast from the referee's whistle cut through the crowd's cheers. Begin! The command rang out across the arena. Without hesitation, Ethan's scorpion-tailed warrior lunged forward under the blessing of its newfound speed. Across the sandy floor, the opposing tank, a massive, high-defense juggernaut, steadied for impact, its armored plates gleaming in the sun. But no steel shell could match the agility of Ethan's machine as it darted, weaved, and closed the distance in a heartbeat. The battle was on. Ethan's voice rang out across the training arena. Northern Shield, harden, then launch the invisible stones. At his command, a faint rocky sheen crept over the defender's armor. The practitioner's eyes gleamed, and suddenly countless stones materialized, disappearing into thin air before hurtling across the field. Stingtail Scorpion, watch for those invisible projectiles. Strike the shield with poison needles, Ethan barked. He'd been expecting this. The moment he recognized the Northern Shield technique, he deduced his opponent's defensive style and prepared a counterattack. With a sharp motion, he unleashed a volley of wickedly barbed darts, each tip dripping with potent toxin. The lone figure behind the stone armor laughed, a hollow, echoing sound, when the first of Ethan's needles pinged harmlessly off the shield. Again and again, they struck with faint metallic clinks, but they failed to find purchase. Don't flinch, Stingtail, Ethan urged. Hold your ground and fire without mercy. Remember Master Ghoststone's method of concentrating your poison. He leaned forward, eyes never leaving his scorpion familiar. The invisible stone's technique slowed the opponent's movements to a sluggish pound, perfect for a relentless assault. And with the arena littered by unseen rock traps, there was no safe retreat. Ethan knew this was his chance. As the defender strained under his own immobilizing magic, the Stingtail Scorpion continued its unerring, venomous onslaught, each dart a step closer to shattering the Northern Shield once and for all. Release it gradually, but be sure to draw the toxins back into your system. Ghoststone's calm voice echoed in the scorpion-tailed elf's mind. The elf's blue eyes glowed with a violet sheen as he remembered his master's teachings on venom control. Although elves and scorpions looked nothing alike, their poisons shared common principles. Channeling that knowledge, he fired another barbed dart. The snapping impact against the Northern Guard's shield rang out like steel on steel, but this time a bruised purple welt pulsed at the point of contact. The guard staggered, one eye squinting shut in sudden pain. "Northwind, keep that shield solid. Don't let him through," the tank bellowed, his voice tight with alarm as he adjusted his stance. Ethan allowed himself a satisfied grin. "Beautiful timing. He's on the ropes, but you're only halfway there. Keep it coming. It's rare to face an opponent who lets us probe his defenses like this, and all that training was for nothing if we don't make the most of it." The scorpion-tailed elf dipped his head in acknowledgement, excitement flaring behind his eyes. At last, he'd found a living target without spines of his own, one he could truly test himself against. Ethan unleashed his poisonous needles again, this time faster and more potent than before. The moment they struck, Northnos was suddenly afflicted with poison. Although its natural resistance meant the toxin's damage was somewhat reduced, Northnos wasn't a steel-type creature and couldn't negate poison entirely. The tank on their team laughed and shook his head. "Seriously? Poison damage? Northnos can shrug that off in a heartbeat. I thought Ethan had some secret ace up his sleeve. Don't worry about him. Just keep using Harden." Ethan didn't even turn to respond. A faint smile curved beneath his hood as he addressed his companion. "Clamp-tail scorpion, do you remember the sting of that toxin?" The scorpion bowed its head eagerly. Training was one thing, but if they couldn't apply these techniques in a real fight, all that practice would have been wasted. It flexed its tail in eager anticipation. "Very good," Ethan said, voice low and steady. "Then let's start the real battle." Ethan crouched low, every muscle coiled and ready. "Getting close," he urged, voice steady with command. "Strike with the poison-tipped tail, and don't hesitate. You've got the speed advantage. He won't be able to keep up." As his companion darted forward, Ethan watched the maneuver with critical eyes. A successful hit here would mean one step closer to clearing the mountain of debt they'd accumulated. The last of those loans needed to be paid before week's end, or they'd face far worse consequences. He let himself breathe for a moment, recalling the promise of what came next, the Trial Island's second stage. This time the challenge would take place in the Novus Village, an arena notorious for its punishing terrain and relentless foes. Getting through it wouldn't be easy, but if they succeeded, everything they'd risked so far would finally pay off. Ethan straightened, determination flashing in his eyes. There was no turning back now. With his partner's tail glowing ominously in the fading light, he readied himself for the next wave of trials and the hope of freedom that lay beyond. Chapter 280, 10 Straight Wins. Ethan gritted his teeth as the scorpion-tailed scorpion, still thrumming with residual toxins, charged across the rocky ground at his north-facing nose. Jagged stones underfoot slowed the beast's advance, but even at a crawl, it was closing in far too fast for the heavy tank to counter by speed alone. "North-facing nose, electromagnetic wave," Ethan shouted into his comm. For the first time, he was unleashing an electric attack from his stalwart north-facing nose. After weeks of reinforcing its armor plating and upgrading its power core, he finally trusted it to absorb the shock of a venomous onslaught. A crackling orb of blue-white energy crackled into being above the robot's snout before hurtling straight at the scorpion. Yet would that be enough? The scorpion-tailed scorpion's barbed tail glowed with a deep, sinister purple, each spine coated in potent toxin. Its signature move, Toxic Sting, boasted uncanny accuracy, far above that of any ordinary attack. With sniper-like precision and venom strong enough to fell even the hardiest opponents, the creature still had every chance of breaking through Ethan's defenses. Ethan watched the scorpion-tailed scorpion lash out again, its venomous sting slowly draining Northfang's health. The poison stacked turn by turn, and even with twice the normal resistance, Northfang's vitality was slipping away. "Northfang, cast sleep!" the tank shouted as his companion came under fire. He'd been ready for an all-out attack, but seeing Northfang marked as the target still made him tense. Ethan offered a cold smile. Of course they'd try to stall, using sleep to blunt the scorpion's assault and let Northfang's heavy defenses wear the monster down over time. Predictable. Scorpion-tailed scorpion, provocation. Under Paula's careful training, the scorpion's taunt had become a deadly weapon. The moment its barbed tail slammed into Northfang, the beast's sleep spell shattered. Provocation forced it out of any support role, disabling all buff and healing abilities for several seconds. Ethan raised his sword and called out, "You can keep Harden up as long as you like, but don't expect me to let you stand unchallenged." Ethan grinned as he watched his claw-tailed scorpion strike true. "I finally have the perfect target. No more downtime for you." With a swift, venomous jab, the scorpion's tail interrupted Northnose's attempt to cast sleep. Ethan couldn't help but admire how far his scorpion had come. In the last few clashes, it had wielded its worm strike with ruthless precision and learned to exploit a sniper's blind spots. Its poison stinger, though, had remained almost untouched. After all, few adversaries could endure a direct hit from that tail. But Northnose presented a live, breathing target that forced the creature to unleash its full arsenal. Now that it could regulate its own venom release, there was no reason to hold back. Northnose's spell fizzled out, and the armored tank blinked in surprise, momentarily at a loss. Ethan had intended to bait him into stacking on layers of defense, let the tank beat the scorpion down, then put him to sleep to restore his stamina, and finally grind him into dust. With sleep shattered, that plan had just hit a major snag. Yet as he surveyed the battlefield, Ethan realized this disruption only opened up new opportunities, and he was more than ready to seize them. Ethan's mind was still reeling when the referee's voice cut through the roar of the crowd. "Nosepass can no longer battle. Tank player, please send out your next Pokémon." Under his mask, Ethan clenched his jaw. He'd known all along that once Nosepass used Harden, he should have stopped it right away. Anyone could see how dangerous its defense boost would be. And yet he'd hesitated, letting that moment slip by, and now his trump card lay defeated on the field. He'd thought he was better than this. With a sinking feeling, he realized he might not win this tournament after all. Regret flooded him. If he'd played more decisively, if he'd cashed in the prize money after his 9th victory, he wouldn't be here, watching his team falter. The tank player on his side nodded and recalled the broken Nosepass. A moment later, a massive, dark yellow Tauros stamped onto the battlefield. Level 24. Top-tier stats, undeniably powerful, yet it lacked a clear advantage against their next opponent. Across the field, Skorupi, Ethan's final ace, was already poised, its pincers gleaming in the stadium lights. Tauros charged. Skorupi responded with pin missile. Then, thanks to its sniper ability, each successive hit scored a critical strike. Tauros buckled almost instantly under the relentless barrage. "Ching-yay! Ching-yay!" The crowd erupted in chant, Ethan's team name echoing around the arena. Victory had come swiftly, but for Ethan, the taste was bittersweet. He knew exactly how easily it could have slipped away, and how close he'd come to letting it all go. "Ethan!" A roar went up from the sidelines as the last challenger, a hulking, armored tank of a fighter, stepped off the field, defeated and dejected. The host strode into the center of the arena, his voice booming through the loudspeakers. With his 10th consecutive victory, Ethan has not only claimed the full prize pool of 1.1 million gold, but has also earned automatic promotion to the second ring. A ripple of excitement ran through the crowd. Ever since Ethan had appeared, an unremarkable name, a black hooded figure hiding his identity, and an elf companion at his side, spectators knew they were witnessing something special. To catch his next match now, fans would need seats in the second tier, where tickets cost well over twice the usual price. Whispers about the staggering prize only fueled their enthusiasm. When the host's fanfare ended, Ethan stepped calmly out of the arena, the fearsome claw-tailed scorpion crouching loyally at his side. He handed the creature to his handler, bowed once to the crowd, and vanished behind the curtains. Even then, the cheers did not die down. Unseen by most, the arena's enchantment trigger mechanism had already done its work, tallying Ethan's winnings and etching his new status in glowing green script above the gate. Next time he returns as a Green Ring combatant, he'll go straight to the second ring registration desk, ready for whatever challenge awaits. Ethan stepped into the first ring and realized almost at once that it offered no real challenge to his elven prowess. The only match with a hint of danger was against the scorpion-tailed scorpion. Every other opponent wound up impaled on its deadly stinger. He knew the next tier would be more instructive. Soon he'd face stone golems and dark ravens that could test his skills. He registered the scorpion-tailed scorpion with the ring's officials, locked in odds of 1.1 to 1, and placed his wagers. First, he staked 150,000 Union credits and walked away with 3 times his money, 450,000 in winnings. In the final bout, he risked another 200,000 and won 300,000 more, bringing his total haul from those bets to 550,000 credits. The other fights were so one-sided that he skipped betting on them altogether. By the end of the day, Ethan had earned 1.65 million league coins. His growing strength demanded ever greater resources, but it also accelerated how quickly he acquired them. It was a self-reinforcing cycle. The stronger he grew, the more he could invest, and the faster his fortune multiplied. Ethan slipped out of the vast battle arena and, with practiced ease, returned his claw-tailed scorpion to its elven sphere. Finding a quiet corner, he changed out of his combat leathers and set off for his manor. With today's training complete, Ethan planned to challenge one elven sprite to combat each day until the final trial. He was determined to give every sprite a chance to prove themselves on the grand stage. After all, sparring sessions could never fully replicate the chaos of real duels, a fact underscored by his scorpion's uneven performance today. Nearly a week remained before the ultimate test. Ethan still had time to hone his strategies and ensure he and every sprite under his care would be ready when the final trial began.